The Arizona desert sun cast long shadows across the Veterans Memorial Park. A sea of white-haired men in pressed uniforms stood at attention, their weathered faces solemn beneath the merciless sky. Among them stood Colonel James Thunderbolt Harrington, his broad shoulders still square at 58, though the desert wind tugged at the silver strands of his military cut. 30 years, 3 decades since Operation Desert Storm. The metal on his chest caught the sunlight as he gazed at the monument bearing the names of those who never returned. His fingers traced the etched letters of Lieutenant Maxwell Cooper, his gunner during those frantic days in the Iraqi desert. "We showed them what American armor could do, Max," he whispered to the cold stone. The ceremony droned on, politicians making speeches about sacrifice and honor, words that felt increasingly hollow to Harrington. He'd heard them before, at too many memorials, spoken by people who had never felt the thunder of a 120mm cannon reverberating through their bones, or smelled the acrid mix of diesel and cordite that defined his life for decades. And so we honor these brave men who, through superior American firepower and technological dominance, secured victory in just 100 hours of ground combat. Harrington's jaw tightened. The politician speaking hadn't mentioned the months of preparation, the endless drills, the brotherhood forged in steel. To them, it was just another historical footnote, a war won by machines rather than men. After the ceremony, General Wilson approached, his aide carrying a folder tucked under his arm. Wilson's face was grim beneath his service cap. "Thunderbolt," he said, using the call sign that had followed Harrington since that famous flanking maneuver at 73 Easting. "Walk with me." They strolled away from the dispersing crowd, past the static displays of retired military vehicles. A weathered M60 Patton tank sat on a concrete pad, its once fearsome presence reduced to a playground attraction for children who climbed over its hull under the watchful eyes of their parents. "I wanted you to hear it from me first," Wilson said, accepting the folder from his aide. "The 5th Armored is being deactivated. Budget cuts." Harrington stopped in his tracks. The 5th had been his home, his family, for most of his adult life. "They're cutting the entire division?" Wilson's gaze was sympathetic but firm. "The future is unmanned systems, precision strikes, and light, rapid deployment forces. Heavy armor is a Cold War relic." He handed over the folder. "The official announcement comes next week. I thought you deserved advance notice." Inside the folder were the cold, bureaucratic details. 3 tank battalions, over 100 M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks, and the associated support units, all to be mothballed or repurposed. Thousands of soldiers to be reassigned or discharged. "Dinosaurs," Harrington muttered, looking back at the static display M60. "That's what they're calling us now." The drive back to his workshop on the outskirts of Phoenix was long and quiet. The radio announcer discussed the latest Pentagon tech initiatives: AI-driven combat systems, autonomous drones, and network-centric warfare. The future of combat, they said, would be fought remotely, with soldiers sitting in air-conditioned rooms thousands of miles from the battlefield. Harrington switched it off as he pulled into the gravel lot of Thunderbolt Armor Works. The sign was faded, the metal building behind it weathered by years of desert sun. His father had opened this place after coming home from Korea, servicing the tanks at the nearby base. Now, with the base closing and the military contracts drying up, it survived on custom work for wealthy collectors and movie productions. Inside, the cavernous workshop smelled of oil and metal. A half-dozen vintage vehicles were in various states of repair, an old Sherman tank being restored for a museum, a British Centurion getting a new engine for a collector, an M113 APC being converted for civilian use. Miguel Suarez, his shop foreman, looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. "How was the ceremony, boss?" Harrington tossed the folder onto his cluttered desk. "They're deactivating the 5th. Miguel's hand stilled on the wrench. "The whole division? Every last tank. Says here they'll be put in storage at Sierra Army Depot until they figure out what to do with them." He gestured around the workshop. "Just like these museum pieces, relics of a bygone era." Miguel wiped his hands on a rag. "What are we going to do? The restoration work barely keeps the lights on." Harrington had no answer. The mortgage on the building was 3 months behind, and the bank was making increasingly urgent calls. Without military contracts, Thunderbolt Armor Works was as obsolete as the tanks it serviced. The sound of tires on gravel outside announced a visitor. Through the dusty window, Harrington spotted his son's government-issue SUV pulling up. Captain Jason Harrington stepped into the workshop, his Air Force uniform crisp despite the desert heat. At 32, he had his father's square jaw and broad shoulders, but his mother's thoughtful eyes. The remote pilot wings on his chest glinted in the workshop lights. "Dad," he said, the word carrying a weight of unspoken tension. "Jason." Harrington nodded, trying to mask his surprise. "Didn't expect to see you today." "I was at Peterson for a systems upgrade. Thought I'd stop by on my way back to Creech." He glanced around the workshop, taking in the vintage vehicles. "How's business?" Before Harrington could answer, Miguel tactfully excused himself to the back room, leaving father and son alone amid the hulking metal beasts. "You heard about the fifth?" Harrington asked. Jason nodded. "It was inevitable, Dad. The future is networked unmanned systems. I can put a Reaper on target anywhere in the world without risking American lives." "You mean without looking the enemy in the eye?" Harrington countered, immediately regretting the sharpness in his tone. His son's face tightened. "I've seen more combat in 5 years than most tankers see in 20. Just because I do it from a control room doesn't make it any less real." The old argument hung between them, as persistent as the gulf that had widened since Jason had chosen the Air Force over the Army, drones over tanks, the future over tradition. "That's not why I came," Jason said finally. "I wanted to tell you in person. I've been offered a position with Apex Dynamics. They're developing the next generation of autonomous combat systems." "The defense contractor?" Harrington frowned. "You're leaving the service?" "I put in my papers. This is a chance to shape the future of warfare, not just execute current doctrine." Jason hesitated. "They want me to head their drone integration division. The pay is significant." Harrington turned away, ostensibly to check a gauge on the Sherman's engine block. "Congratulations," he managed. "Your mother would have been proud." "There's more," Jason continued. "I know you were hoping I'd eventually take over the shop, but with this new position." The words hit Harrington like a physical blow. 4 generations of Harringtons had served in American armor. His grandfather in Patton's Third Army, his father in Korea, himself in Desert Storm. The workshop was supposed to be the family legacy when active service was done. "You're making the right call," Harrington said, his voice rough. "This place is a dinosaur, just like me. The bank will probably own it by Christmas anyway." "Dad, I could help with the financial situation. My signing bonus—" "I don't need charity," Harrington cut him off. "I need customers. And unless someone suddenly needs a fleet of restored M60 tanks, we're out of luck." The silence between them grew uncomfortably long. "I should go," Jason finally said. "My flight leaves in 3 hours." Harrington nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He watched through the window as his son drove away, the SUV kicking up dust that hung in the air like the ghosts of possibilities never realized. That night, Harrington sat alone in his small house adjacent to the workshop, a glass of bourbon in one hand and a photo album open on the kitchen table. Images of his younger self grinned back at him from the turret of various tanks. A fresh-faced lieutenant with his first M60, a captain standing proudly beside an M1 Abrams in Saudi Arabia, a major receiving the Silver Star for the action that earned him his call sign. His phone rang, the screen showing a number he hadn't seen in years. Frank Miller. They'd served together in Desert Storm before Miller left the armor branch for a career in defense research. "Doc Miller," Harrington answered, using his old friend's call sign. "Been a long time." "Too long, Thunderbolt." Miller's voice brought back memories of sand and steel. "I heard about the fifth. Damn shame." "Progress marches on," Harrington said bitterly. "Soon it'll all be drones and robots." "That's actually why I'm calling." Miller's tone shifted, becoming more guarded. "I'm at DARPA now, working on some classified programs I can't discuss. But there's something non-classified you should know about." Harrington straightened, his attention caught by the urgency in Miller's voice. "I'm listening." "The Army's sitting on over 800 M60A3 tanks in climate-controlled storage at Sierra. They've been there since the early 90s. Congressional mandate says they can't sell them to just anyone because of security concerns, but they're taking up valuable space. And they want them gone. There's talk of an internal auction before they go to the scrap heap. Limited participants, mostly bigger contractors looking to strip them for parts or sell the scrap metal." Harrington's mind raced. 800 M60s, the same tanks he'd trained on as a young officer. Not the most advanced platform, but reliable, proven, and built like fortresses. "Why are you telling me this, Frank?" Miller's laugh crackled over the line. "Because I saw what those Israeli and Turkish upgrade packages did for their M60 fleets. Turn those old war horses into something that could hold its own against much newer designs at a fraction of the cost. Harrington remembered the reports. The Israeli Sabra and Turkish M60T modernization programs had taken the aging M60 platform and transformed it with modern fire control systems, improved power plants, and enhanced armor. You think there's a market for upgraded M60s? I know there is, Miller replied confidently. Not every ally can afford brand new Abrams tanks at $10 million a pop. But a modernized M60 at a quarter of that price? Countries like Jordan, Morocco, Taiwan, they'd snap them up. Harrington's pulse quickened. The big defense contractors must already be all over this. They are. But they're thinking about stripping them for parts, not modernizing them. They make more money selling new platforms. Miller paused. There's one exception. Cortec Defense is rumored to be putting together a bid for the whole lot. The name hit Harrington like a cold wave. Blackwood's company? The same. Richard Shark Blackwood himself. Word is they want to convert some of them into autonomous target drones for weapons testing. Richard Blackwood. The memory surfaced like a submarine breaking through ice. Then Major Blackwood had been with Army intelligence during Desert Storm, attached to Harrington's battalion. He had opposed the flanking maneuver that ultimately made Harrington a legend, arguing it was too risky, too unorthodox. When Harrington went ahead anyway, successfully destroying an entire Iraqi armored brigade, Blackwood had tried to have him court-martialed for insubordination. The charges were dropped when the results spoke for themselves, but Blackwood never forgave being proven wrong. He left the Army shortly after, founding what would become Cortec Defense, now one of the largest military contractors in the country. Turning those tanks into target practice, Harrington muttered. That would be just like him. The auction's in 6 weeks, Miller continued. Most smaller operators don't even know about it. Thought you might be interested. Harrington's mind was already calculating possibilities. The workshop, the skilled technicians, the decades of experience with armored vehicles. They had everything needed to upgrade those M60s, everything except capital. I appreciate the heads up, Frank, but I can barely keep the lights on here. I don't have the kind of money needed to bid against Cortec. Maybe not alone, Miller agreed, but you've got something Blackwood doesn't. Respect from the tank community. I know a dozen former tankers who went into business after retiring. Some of them did pretty well for themselves. The idea began to take shape. A consortium of veteran-owned businesses, pooling resources to bid on the tanks, then working together on the modernization program. It's a long shot, Harrington admitted. Long shots were always your specialty, Thunderbolt, Miller replied. Remember 73 Easting? Nobody thought 4 tanks could take on a brigade either. After hanging up, Harrington couldn't sleep. He spent the night in the workshop, poring over technical manuals and modernization studies, old contacts and equipment inventories. By dawn, he had the beginnings of a plan. The first call went to Thomas Wrench Martinez. They'd served together in the 5th, where Martinez had been the battalion's miracle worker, a mechanical savant who could coax an engine back to life with nothing but spare parts and profanity. Now he ran a specialty engineering firm in Texas, designing custom solutions for unusual mechanical problems. A fleet of M60s? Martinez's voice was incredulous. You're either crazy or brilliant, Thunderbolt. Maybe both. Can your shop handle the power plant upgrades? We'd need to replace those old AVDS 1790 engines with something more modern, higher horsepower, better fuel efficiency. Could do it in my sleep. I've got designs for a 3,200 horsepower package that would fit in that engine bay. Better power-to-weight ratio than an Abrams. The next call was to Karen Eagle Eye Reynolds. The former fire control systems specialist had left the Army for Silicon Valley, founding a successful company that specialized in military-grade electronics and targeting systems. Modernizing the fire control on those old beasts would be challenging, she admitted. But we've been working on a modular system that could interface with almost any platform. Digital ballistic computer, thermal imaging, laser rangefinder, the works. By midday, Harrington had spoken with 6 former colleagues, all now running successful businesses in various aspects of military technology. Each conversation added new pieces to the puzzle. Miguel Suarez had been listening, his expression growing more animated as the plan took shape. This could save the shop, boss, he said during a break between calls. But we'd need a demo unit to prove the concept, something to show potential investors and customers what these upgraded tanks could do. Harrington nodded. I know someone who might help us there, Army buddy who runs the Tank Museum in Fort Bliss. They've got a few M60A3s in running condition. Might be willing to loan us one for development purposes. The plan was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy. But for the first time in years, Harrington felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded combat operations. This was a battle worth fighting, not just for the workshop, but for the legacy of American armor. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the workshop floor, Harrington made one final call to his son. Jason answered on the fourth ring, airport announcements audible in the background. "Dad, everything okay?" Harrington hesitated. "I need to know something. Your new employer, Apex Dynamics, any connection to Cortec Defense?" "They're a subsidiary," Jason replied, sounding confused. "Why?" The connection was worse than Harrington had feared. Not just a competitor, but family working for the enemy. "Just curious," he lied. "Have a safe flight." He hung up before Jason could ask more questions. The personal and professional were now hopelessly entangled. If he pursued this plan, he would be directly competing against a company that now employed his son. But the alternative was to stand aside and watch as hundreds of American tanks, machines that had protected their country, that men had fought and died in, were scrapped or turned into target practice. Machines that represented not just military hardware, but a tradition of American armored warfare stretching back to Patton himself. "We're really doing this?" Miguel asked, reading the determination on his boss's face. Harrington looked around the workshop at the vintage vehicles that represented America's armored past. What he was contemplating would bridge that past with the future. "We're really doing this," he confirmed. "First thing tomorrow, we start putting together a business plan and reaching out to potential investors." That night, as Harrington finally returned to his small house, he paused to look up at the desert stars. Somewhere out there, his son was flying back to Nevada, to his life of remote-controlled warfare. Two generations of American warriors, separated not just by distance, but by an unbridgeable technological divide. Or perhaps not unbridgeable after all. Perhaps these old tanks could become the bridge. Chapter 2. Last Chance from the Past. The call came at 0600, military precision from a man who had never quite adjusted to civilian time. Harrington was already awake, reviewing the preliminary business plan he'd drafted overnight. "Thunderbolt!" Frank Miller's voice had an edge of excitement. "I've got something you need to see. How fast can you get to DC?" "DC? Frank, I'm in Arizona. That's not exactly a day trip. Trust me, it's worth it. I can get you into Sierra for a first-hand look at the M60 inventory. Official DARPA inspection visit." Harrington's pulse quickened. Seeing the tanks personally would give them crucial information about their condition, maintenance history, and upgrade potential. Details that wouldn't be in the auction listing. "I'll be on the next flight." 12 hours later, Harrington stood beside Miller in a massive climate-controlled warehouse at Sierra Army Depot. Row upon row of M60A3 tanks stretched into the distance, their olive-drab paint dulled by years in storage, but their silhouettes still imposing. "They've been maintained in working order," Miller explained, leading him down an aisle between the metal behemoths. "Preservation protocols, climate control, regular fluid changes. These old girls could roll out tomorrow if needed." Harrington ran a hand along the cast turret of the nearest tank, feeling the solid American steel beneath his fingertips. Not the composite armor of modern designs, but thick and reliable. "Most of them have less than 2,000 miles on the odometer," Miller continued, "practically new by military vehicle standards." They spent hours inspecting the inventory, Harrington making detailed notes on his phone. The tanks were mostly the A3 variant, featuring the last upgrades before the M60 was phased out in favor of the M1 Abrams. Thermal sleeves on the 105mm main guns, improved fire control, better transmission, solid foundations for modernization. "What's the reserve price looking like?" Harrington asked as they finished their inspection. Miller glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. "Scrap value plus 10%. The Army just wants them gone, but I'll be honest, Cortec is prepared to bid much higher. They've got Pentagon connections pushing for them to win." Harrington's jaw tightened. Political connections? The worst kind. Senator Howard Williams chairs the Armed Services Committee. Word is he's pushing hard for Cortec to get the contract. The name hit like a physical blow. Senator Williams, his former father-in-law. The man had never approved of Harrington, considering him a reckless maverick, unworthy of his daughter. When Catherine died in a car accident 12 years ago, the relationship had deteriorated further, with Williams blaming Harrington for not being there, deployed overseas while his daughter needed him. "Williams is backing Blackwood?" Harrington's voice was carefully neutral. Miller nodded grimly. They're golfing buddies now. Williams has been championing drone warfare in committee, pushing budget from traditional armor programs to unmanned systems. Cortec is a major contractor in that space. The political dimension complicated matters significantly. This wasn't just a business competition anymore. It was personal, with powerful forces aligned against them. We need to move fast, Harrington decided. Gather our investor group, prepare our bid, and develop a compelling modernization package. If we can't outspend Cortec, we'll need to outsmart them. On the flight back to Phoenix, Harrington couldn't stop thinking about the rows of tanks sitting in storage. Machines designed to protect American soldiers, built with American steel by American workers, now gathering dust. If Cortec won the auction, most would be scrapped or used as target practice, a fate unbefitting their proud legacy. His phone buzzed with a message from Jason. Heard you were at Sierra today. What are you up to, Dad? Harrington stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. His son was now effectively working for the competition. Could he trust him with the truth? Just consulting on a potential restoration project, he texted back. Not quite a lie, but far from the full truth. The response came quickly. Be careful dealing with military surplus. Lots of regulations. Call if you need advice. Was it a genuine offer of help, or was Jason fishing for information on behalf of his new employers? Harrington hated that he even had to wonder. Back at Thunderbolt Armor Works, Harrington found Thomas Martinez waiting. The stocky, tattooed former master sergeant looked out of place in the pressed button-down shirt and slacks that had replaced his usual oil-stained coveralls. Wrench, Harrington greeted him with a firm handshake. Didn't expect you in person so soon. Martinez shrugged, his expression serious. Some things need to be discussed face-to-face. Your M60 modernization plan is one of them. Inside, Miguel had cleared space on the main workbench and set up a projector. Technical schematics of the M60A3 tank were spread across the surface, annotated with yellow sticky notes. So, Martinez began without preamble, I've been running the numbers on the power plant upgrade. The good news is we can definitely get a modern engine into that hull. I'm thinking the MTU 883 diesel, same family as what's in the new Leopard tanks. 1,200 horsepower, good torque curve, proven reliability. He pointed to the engine compartment on one of the schematics. We'd need to modify the engine bay slightly, upgrade the cooling system, and install a new transmission to handle the power increase. But it's all doable. My team could process about 2 tanks per week once we get the process streamlined. Harrington nodded, impressed by the thoroughness of Martinez's preparation. What about the fire control system? We'd need something that can compete with modern tanks. That's where I come in, a new voice announced. Karen Reynolds stood in the doorway, a sleek laptop case slung over her shoulder. In her mid-40s, she carried herself with the confident precision that had made her one of the best fire control technicians in the Army. Now she ran KR Systems, a defense electronics firm specializing in weapons interfaces. Eagle Eye, Harrington smiled. Thanks for coming on short notice. Wouldn't miss it, she replied, stepping into the workshop and surveying the space with an appraising eye. So this is Thunderbolt Armor Works. Nice setup. She joined them at the workbench, opening her laptop to display a 3D model of what appeared to be a compact electronics package. This is our newest fire control system, the FCSX, digital ballistic computer, thermal imaging with target recognition algorithms, laser rangefinder accurate to within half a meter at 4,000 meters. We designed it to be retrofitted into older platforms. She rotated the model, highlighting various components. The beauty of this system is its modularity. We can install the core package, then add capabilities based on customer requirements and budget. Basic package gives you night fighting capability and improved first-round hit probability. Full package adds hunter-killer capability, battlefield networking, and automated target prioritization. Harrington studied the system's specifications, recognizing how revolutionary such technology would have been during his combat days. The ability to accurately hit targets at night, on the move, at extreme ranges, capabilities that would have saved countless lives. Cost per unit, he asked? $400,000 for the basic package, $650 for the full suite. Installation adds another $100,000 per tank due to the custom integration work. The figures were significant, but not prohibitive, especially spread across hundreds of units, with the tanks themselves likely to cost little more than scrap value. The economics could work. What about the main gun? Miguel asked, pointing to the M60's 5mm cannon. That's outdated by modern standards. Martinez nodded. That's the biggest challenge. Upgrading to a 120mm smoothbore would be ideal for commonality with NATO ammunition, but it's a major modification. The Israelis did it with their Sabra upgrade, Harrington pointed out. We could license their technology or develop our own solution. The discussion continued into the evening, with each expert contributing ideas for various aspects of the modernization package. By nightfall, two distinct upgrade paths had emerged. The first, which they dubbed the M60 Warhorse, was a cost-effective package focusing on improved mobility, protection, and fire control. Estimated upgrade cost, $1.2 million per tank, with a potential sale price of $2.5 million. Still a quarter the cost of a new main battle tank. The second, more ambitious path was the M60 Thunderbolt. This comprehensive modernization would include a 120mm main gun, advanced composite armor, active protection systems, and full battlefield networking capabilities. Estimated upgrade cost, $2.4 million per tank, with a potential sale price of $4.5 million. Two-tiered approach gives us flexibility, Harrington explained. We can offer the Warhorse to budget-conscious allies, the Thunderbolt to those who need near-peer capabilities but can't afford the latest generation tanks. Martinez nodded approvingly. Smart, different price points for different requirements. We still need to address the elephant in the room, Karen said, her expression serious. Funding. The auction deposit alone will be in the millions, not to mention working capital for the initial upgrades. Harrington had been pondering this problem. I've been making calls to former tankers who went into business. We've got tentative commitments for about $5 million in investment, plus equipment loans and expertise. But we'll need more. What about a strategic partner, Miguel suggested? A foreign defense contractor looking to enter the U.S. market? Too risky, Karen shook her head. Foreign ownership would complicate export approvals. We need American backing. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel outside. Through the window, Harrington spotted a black SUV with government plates pulling into the lot. Expecting someone? Martinez asked, suddenly alert. Harrington wasn't, and his hand instinctively moved toward the desk drawer where he kept a pistol. Old habits from deployments in dangerous places. The workshop door opened, and a tall man in a tailored suit entered. In his 60s, with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, he surveyed the room with cold calculation. Colonel Harrington, he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. It's been a long time. Harrington stiffened, recognizing him immediately. General Blackwood. Didn't know they let core tech executives use government vehicles these days. Richard Blackwood smiled thinly. Privileges of being a defense contractor. We serve the national interest, after all. His gaze swept over the schematics on the workbench. I see you've been busy. M60 modernization? Quite the ambitious project for a repair shop. The subtle emphasis on the last two words made clear his disdain. What do you want, Blackwood? Harrington asked bluntly. To save you time and money, Blackwood replied, strolling further into the workshop as if he owned it. I understand you're considering bidding on the Sierra M60 inventory. Admirable but futile, TL. He paused beside the workbench, glancing at the modernization plans with feigned interest. Cortec will be acquiring those tanks. The decision has effectively been made. The auction is a formality. Harrington crossed his arms. If that's true, why bother coming here? Professional courtesy, Blackwood said, though his tone suggested anything but. And to make you an offer, Cortec can use experienced tank mechanics for our drone target conversion program. Contract work, of course, but well compensated. The insult was thinly veiled. Blackwood was offering Harrington a chance to dismantle the very machines he had dedicated his life to, turning them into targets for weapons testing. Not interested, Harrington said flatly. Blackwood shrugged. As you wish. But I should mention, we've recently hired a promising young talent for our drone integration division. Captain Jason Harrington, your son, I believe? The implicit threat hung in the air. Get in our way and your son's career might suffer. Leave my son out of this, Harrington growled. Of course, Blackwood said smoothly. I merely thought you'd be proud. He's quite talented. Takes after his mother, I think. Before Harrington could respond, Martinez stepped forward, his muscular frame tense like a coiled spring. I think it's time for you to leave, General. Blackwood's smile never wavered. Of course. I've said what I came to say. He turned back to Harrington. One final thought, Colonel. The world is changing. Tanks are dinosaurs, powerful in their time but doomed to extinction. Don't waste your remaining years fighting the inevitable. With that, he departed, leaving a wake of tension in the workshop. Charming fellow, Karen remarked dryly. Friend of yours? Ancient history, Harrington muttered, his mind racing. Blackwood's visit confirmed two things. Cortec was serious about acquiring the M60 fleet, and they considered Thunderbolt Armor Works enough of a threat to warrant intimidation tactics. What now, boss? Miguel asked. Harrington studied the modernization plans spread across the workbench. These old tanks still had value, still had a role to play in the modern world. He wasn't going to let them be scrapped or turned into target drones without a fight. Now, he said, determination hardening his voice, we accelerate. Blackwood thinks he's got this locked up, which means he'll be complacent. We need to finalize our investor group, prepare our bid, and most importantly, develop a working prototype to prove our concept. Martinez nodded, his earlier tension replaced with resolve. I can have my team start on the power plant modifications immediately. We'll need a donor vehicle. I'll call Fort Bliss in the morning, Harrington agreed. See if the museum can loan us one of their runners. Karen was already typing on her laptop. I'll fast-track the fire control system integration design. We can have a package ready for installation within 2 weeks. As they outlined the accelerated timeline, Harrington felt a familiar sensation, the calm certainty that came with committing to a course of action. It was the same feeling he'd had before the famous flanking maneuver at 73 Easting, when conventional wisdom said to wait for reinforcements, but instinct told him to attack. That decision had made his career. This one might save it and preserve a piece of American military heritage in the process. Later that night, after the others had departed, Harrington sat alone in his office, studying satellite photos of the Sierra Army Depot. 800 tanks, representing not just military hardware, but a tradition of American armored warfare stretching back generations. His phone buzzed with a text message from Jason. Dad, whatever you're planning with those M60s, be careful. Blackwood plays dirty. So his son knew about Blackwood's visit. The question was, whose side was Jason on? Harrington stared at the message for a long moment before typing a response. Some things are worth fighting for, even against the odds. He hit send, then turned back to his plans. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 3, David against Goliath. The desert morning broke cool and clear, the sun not yet high enough to turn the workshop into an oven. Harrington arrived early, unlocking the main bay doors to let in the fresh air. The schematics from yesterday still covered the workbench, now accompanied by additional notes and calculations from the late-night planning session. His phone rang as he was brewing coffee. Major Lewis from the Fort Bliss Tank Museum. Colonel Harrington, Lewis greeted him. Got your message about borrowing one of our M60s for testing. Normally I'd have to say no, but General Wilson put in a good word. Said it's for potential modernization research. Harrington silently thanked Wilson for his support. That's right. We're developing upgrade packages for the Sierra inventory. Need a test bed for systems integration. I can help with that, Lewis replied. We've got an M60A3 TTS in running condition. One of the last ones built in 1987, less than 1,000 miles on it. It's technically on loan to us from Army Materiel Command, so the paperwork would be simpler than with one of our permanent collection pieces. Perfect, Harrington said, already envisioning the modifications they would make. How soon can we arrange transport? Give me a week to process the loan agreement. You'll need to cover shipping, of course. Not a problem. We appreciate the assistance, Major. After hanging up, Harrington sent a group message to the core team. Got our test bed, M60A3 TTS from Fort Bliss, available next week. Martinez, prep your shop for power plant mods. Karen, finalize the FCS integration design. Miguel, will need the main bay cleared for when it arrives. The responses came quickly, everyone confirming their tasks. The project was gaining momentum. The rest of the morning was spent on financial matters. Harrington made calls to potential investors, former tankers who had gone on to successful business careers. By noon, he had solid commitments for $7.3 million in funding, with more likely to follow as word spread through the tight-knit armor community. Miguel entered the office, wiping grease from his hands. Boss, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from Jordan. Harrington frowned, not expecting any visitors. Jordan, the country? That's what he said. Military attaché or something. Very polite, but insistent on speaking with you personally. Curious, Harrington followed Miguel to the main workshop area. A man in his 50s stood examining the partially restored Sherman tank. He wore an expensive suit that seemed at odds with the dusty surroundings and carried himself with military bearing. "Colonel Harrington," the man said in accented but fluent English, extending a hand. "Colonel Karim Nassar, Jordanian Royal Armored Corps, currently serving as military attaché in Washington. It is an honor to meet the hero of 73 Easting." Harrington shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip. "Welcome to Thunderbolt Armor Works, Colonel Nassar. What brings you to our corner of the desert?" Nassar smiled diplomatically. "Word travels quickly in certain circles, Colonel. I understand you may be developing modernization packages for M60 tanks. Jordan maintains a substantial fleet of M60s, and we are always exploring cost-effective upgrade options." Harrington's surprise must have shown on his face because Nassar added, "Dr. Miller at DARPA is an old friend. He mentioned your project might align with our interests." Frank Miller, of course. The man had connections throughout the global defense community. "We're in the early stages," Harrington admitted. "But yes, we're developing 2 upgrade packages for the M60 platform. Would you like to see our preliminary designs?" "Very much so," Nassar confirmed. For the next hour, Harrington walked the Jordanian colonel through their modernization concepts. Nassar asked technical questions that revealed both his expertise and his country's specific requirements: enhanced desert performance, protection against modern anti-tank weapons, and compatibility with existing logistics systems. "Your Warhorse package is particularly interesting," Nassar commented as they concluded the tour. "The cost-to-capability ratio seems well-suited to our needs. When might you have a functioning prototype?" "We're expecting the test vehicle next week. Initial modifications should be complete within a month, with full systems integration by the end of the quarter." Nassar nodded thoughtfully. "Jordan would be interested in observing the testing phase. Potentially, we might consider an initial order of 20 units, assuming performance meets expectations." The statement hit Harrington like a thunderbolt. 20 units at $2.5 million each represented a $50 million contract, enough to establish their business model and attract additional customers. "We'd welcome Jordanian observers during testing," Harrington said, careful to maintain a professional demeanor despite his excitement. "And we could tailor certain aspects of the package to your specific requirements." "Excellent," Nassar replied with a slight smile. "I should mention that Morocco, Egypt, and Taiwan have also expressed interest in M60 modernization options. Perhaps a joint demonstration could be arranged?" The implications were staggering. If multiple countries placed orders, they could potentially upgrade hundreds of tanks, a market worth billions. As Nassar prepared to leave, he paused. "One question remains, Colonel. How will you secure the baseline vehicles? I understand the Sierra inventory auction is quite competitive." The delicate phrasing confirmed what Harrington already suspected. Word of Cortex interest had spread internationally. "We're preparing our bid," Harrington said simply. "We believe we have a compelling case based on export potential and job creation." Nassar's expression was unreadable. "I wish you success, Colonel. Jordan would prefer to do business with fellow soldiers who understand the realities of armored warfare." He handed Harrington a business card. "Please keep me informed of your progress." After the Jordanian departed, Harrington called an emergency team meeting. Karen and Martinez connected via video conference, while Miguel sat across the desk. "We've got potential customers," Harrington announced without preamble. "Jordan, possibly Morocco, Egypt, and Taiwan as well. But they're waiting to see a functioning prototype." "That changes the timeline," Karen noted. "We need to prioritize getting the testbed operational with at least the basic systems." Martinez nodded on screen. "I can expedite the power plant modifications. My team will work round the clock if necessary." "There's another issue," Harrington continued. "Funding for the auction bid. Even with our current investors, we're still short of what Cortec can bring to the table." "What about a strategic partner?" Miguel suggested again. "With confirmed international interest, we might attract a major player." Harrington considered the idea. A larger partner would provide the financial backing they needed, but might also demand control over the project. "Let me make some calls," he decided. There are a few American defense contractors who might see this as an opportunity to expand their export business without competing directly with their primary product lines. The meeting concluded with a renewed sense of urgency. What had started as a desperate attempt to save Thunderbolt Armor Works had evolved into something much larger, a project with international implications and potential billions in revenue. That evening, as Harrington was reviewing loan documents for the workshop mortgage, his phone rang. The screen showed his son's number. "Jason," he answered, bracing for difficult questions. "Dad?" His son's voice was tight with concern. I need to warn you, Cortec is playing dirty. They're filing complaints with the State Department claiming your M60 modernization project violates export control regulations. Harrington sat up straighter. That's ridiculous. We haven't exported anything. Intent to export is enough to trigger an investigation, Jason explained. They're claiming you're developing weapon systems with the specific intent to circumvent arms control treaties. On what grounds? They're saying you've already been meeting with representatives from Jordan and other countries, discussing technical specifications. Nassar's visit. Somehow Cortec had learned about it almost immediately. How do you know this? Harrington asked, suddenly suspicious. Are you involved? No. Jason's response was emphatic. I overheard Blackwood discussing it. He doesn't know I'm your son. I use your mother's maiden name professionally. But Dad, this is serious. An export control investigation could freeze your assets, prevent you from bidding on the tanks at all. Harrington's mind raced through the implications. Such an investigation, even if ultimately dismissed, could delay their project by months, long enough for Cortec to secure the tanks unchallenged. Thanks for the warning, he said finally. I appreciate it. There's more, Jason continued, his voice lower now. Blackwood has been meeting with Senator Williams. They're pushing for legislation that would classify the M60 inventory as strategic military assets, requiring special disposal procedures. Procedures that would favor large contractors. Senator Williams again. Harrington's former father-in-law was using his position to help Cortec. How much time do we have? The legislation is being drafted now. Could be attached as a rider to the Defense Appropriations Bill next month. Jason paused. Dad, be careful. Blackwood is obsessed with beating you on this. It's personal for him. After ending the call, Harrington sat in the darkened office, weighing options. Cortec was mobilizing its considerable resources to block their bid. Legal challenges, political connections, perhaps even industrial espionage given how quickly they'd learned about Nassar's visit. His phone buzzed with an incoming email from Frank Miller. The subject line read simply, "Found this, thought you should see it." Attached was a PowerPoint document titled Project Behemoth, M60 Conversion Initiative. It appeared to be an internal Cortec presentation, outlining their plans for the Sierra inventory. Harrington scrolled through the slides with growing alarm. Cortec intended to convert a portion of the tanks into autonomous target drones as expected, but the larger plan was more insidious. They planned to modify the remaining tanks with remotely operated weapon systems, creating what amounted to unmanned ground vehicles controlled from bunkers thousands of miles away. The final slides detailed the marketing strategy, selling these unmanned tank systems to allies as a way to project armored force without risking personnel. Potential customers included Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other wealthy nations with limited military manpower but significant security concerns. It was a clever business model, Harrington had to admit, but it fundamentally changed the nature of armored warfare, removing the human element that had defined tank combat since its inception. No crew working together in the close confines of a turret, no commander making split-second decisions based on what he could see and feel on the battlefield. This wasn't preserving the legacy of American armor, it was perverting it. With renewed determination, Harrington began making notes. Cortec had advantages in money and political connections, but Thunderbolt Armor Works had something they lacked: authentic expertise in armored warfare and a network of veterans who understood the true value of these machines. If this was to be a battle between David and Goliath, then they would need to use every stone in their sling. The next morning brought unexpected support from a surprising quarter. General Wilson called with news that several retired generals had expressed interest in the modernization project, offering both investment and advocacy within the Pentagon. They don't like the idea of American tanks being turned into drones, Wilson explained. Feels wrong to them, like disrespecting the platform's heritage. They're willing to put their reputations behind your approach. The endorsement of senior retired officers would provide crucial credibility, especially in countering the export control allegations. If former generals with security clearances vouched for the project, regulatory concerns would be significantly diminished. By midday, Harrington had scheduled a video conference with 3 former tank battalion commanders, all now executives at various defense and technology companies. Each committed additional investment and, more importantly, technical resources, engineers, facilities, and testing capabilities that would accelerate their prototype development. The battle lines were drawn. Cortec had money and political influence. Thunderbolt Armor Works had expertise, veteran networks, and now the backing of military leadership. The outcome would determine not just the fate of 800 tanks, but potentially the future direction of American armored warfare doctrine. As Harrington watched the sun set over the desert from his workshop doorway, he reflected on the stakes. This wasn't just about saving his business anymore. It was about preserving a legacy that stretched back through generations of American tankers. The belief that the ultimate fighting machine needed humans at its core, making decisions that no algorithm could replicate. Blackwood and his autonomous tanks represented one vision of warfare's future. Harrington and his modernized but human-crewed design represented another. The M60s sitting in storage at Sierra weren't just military hardware. They were the physical embodiment of an American fighting tradition. And Harrington was determined that tradition would not end on his watch. His phone rang again. This time it was an unfamiliar number with a Virginia area code. "Colonel Harrington," said a woman's voice when he answered. "My name is Amanda Chen, from Dynamic Systems Defense. I understand you're looking for a strategic partner for your M60 modernization program." Harrington straightened. Dynamic Systems was one of the largest independent defense contractors in the country, specializing in modernization packages for existing platforms rather than developing new ones. "That's correct," he confirmed cautiously. "Our CEO would like to discuss potential collaboration. We have significant experience with upgrade packages for legacy systems, including extensive work with the Israeli Defense Forces on their tank modernization programs." It was the breakthrough they needed, a major American contractor with the financial resources to compete with Cortec and the technical experience to validate their approach. "I'm very interested in that conversation," Harrington replied, hope rising in his chest. Perhaps David had found his sling after all. "Excellent," Chen said. "There's a jet waiting at Phoenix Sky Harbor to bring you to our headquarters. How soon can you be there?" Harrington glanced at his watch. It was already evening, but this opportunity couldn't wait. "I can be there in 2 hours." As he gathered his presentation materials and the latest modernization specs, Harrington felt the momentum shifting. Cortec might have political connections and deep pockets, but the alliance forming around Thunderbolt Armor Works had something more valuable: a shared vision for preserving the human element in armored warfare. The battle for the soul of American armor had begun in earnest. The Dynamic Systems Defense corporate jet touched down at Reagan National Airport just after midnight. Despite the late hour, a car was waiting to transport Harrington to the company's headquarters in Northern Virginia. The driver, a retired Army sergeant who recognized Harrington's name immediately, filled the journey with respectful conversation about Desert Storm and the glory days of American armor. The DSD campus sprawled across several acres of manicured lawns and modern buildings. Even at this hour, lights burned in many windows, testament to the ceaseless work of defense contracting. Harrington was escorted directly to a conference room on the top floor, where 4 people waited despite the hour. Colonel Harrington, a tall woman in her 50s, extended her hand. "Eleanor Ramirez, CEO of Dynamic Systems. Thank you for coming on such short notice." Harrington shook her hand, noting her firm grip and direct gaze. "Appreciate the invitation." Ramirez introduced the others: her chief technical officer, chief financial officer, and a retired 3-star general who now served as the company's military advisor. All were examining documents and technical specifications related to the M60 modernization program. "We'll get right to it," Ramirez said, gesturing for Harrington to take a seat. "Your M60 modernization concept has attracted our attention for several reasons. First, it aligns with our business model of extending the service life of proven platforms. Second, it offers export potential to allies who can't afford brand new systems. And third," she paused, "it presents an opportunity to compete with Cortec in a market segment they're targeting aggressively." The mention of Cortec caught Harrington's attention. There was clearly no love lost between the two defense giants. "You're aware of Cortec's intentions for the Sierra inventory?" he asked. The general nodded. "Converting them to unmanned systems. Blackwood's been pitching the concept hard at the Pentagon. Some of the younger officers are receptive, especially those who've never served in armored units. We believe there's still a place for manned tanks on the modern battlefield," Ramirez continued, "particularly for allies who don't have the infrastructure to support complex autonomous systems. That's where your modernization packages could find a significant market." For the next hour, Harrington presented his concept in detail. The 2-tiered approach with the baseline Warhorse and advanced Thunderbolt packages, the technical specifications, the potential customer base, and the economics of the program. The DSD executives asked pointed questions about engineering challenges, regulatory hurdles, and competitive threats. Harrington answered each directly, neither overselling the concept nor minimizing the obstacles. As the discussion wrapped up, Ramirez glanced at her colleagues, receiving subtle nods from each. Colonel, we'd like to propose a partnership. DSD would provide $50 million in funding for your consortium to bid on the Sierra inventory. In return, we'd become the primary systems integrator for the modernization program, with Thunderbolt Armor Works as the lead design authority and your veteran-owned business partners handling key subsystems. It was more than Harrington had hoped for, financial backing from a major player while still maintaining control over the project's direction. That sounds promising, he said cautiously. What else would the partnership entail? DSD would handle international marketing, regulatory compliance, and final assembly. Your team would focus on design, testing, and validation. We'd also provide legal support against any challenges CoreTech might present. The CFO slid a preliminary term sheet across the table. The financial details were generous. DSD would fund the acquisition and initial modernization costs in exchange for a 40% stake in the program. The remaining 60% would be divided among Harrington's consortium members based on their contributions. We'd need an answer quickly, Ramirez added. The auction is in 4 weeks, and there's preparation work to be done. Harrington scanned the document. The terms were fair, perhaps even favorable given the resources DSD was committing. But one detail caught his attention. This specifies that I would need to commit full-time to the program for at least 3 years, relocating to your Virginia facility. Ramirez nodded. Your expertise and reputation are central to the program's credibility. We need you visible and engaged. It would mean leaving Arizona, abandoning the workshop his father had built. Yet the alternative was watching it fail as the military contracts disappeared, then losing it to the bank when the mortgage couldn't be paid. I'll need to consult with my partners, Harrington said. But speaking for myself, I'm inclined to accept. Ramirez smiled for the first time. Excellent. We'll expect your final answer within 48 hours. She rose, extending her hand again. One more thing, Colonel. We've arranged for you to visit Sierra tomorrow morning. Our corporate helicopter will take you there. We'd like your assessment of exactly which tanks in the inventory would be the best candidates for modernization. The implication was clear. DSD wasn't just considering this partnership. They were already acting as if it were confirmed. Dawn found Harrington aboard a sleek corporate helicopter, flying over the Sierra Nevada mountains toward the Army Depot. Below, the landscape transitioned from rugged peaks to the flat expanse of the high desert where the massive storage facility was located. The depot superintendent, a retired colonel who had served under Harrington in Desert Storm, was waiting as the helicopter touched down. Thunder, he greeted Harrington with a firm handshake. Heard you might be giving our old girls a new lease on life. That's the plan, Bill, if we can make the numbers work. The superintendent gave him a knowing look. CoreTech's been sniffing around, sent a team of engineers last week to evaluate the inventory, very interested in the newer A3 models. This was valuable intelligence. If CoreTech was focusing on the A3 variants, it suggested their drone conversion program required the more advanced fire control systems those tanks carried. I'd like to see a cross-section of the inventory, Harrington said, particularly the earlier A1 models if you have them. For the next several hours, Harrington inspected dozens of tanks, making detailed notes on their condition, modification history, and suitability for different upgrade paths. The older A1 variants would actually be better candidates for comprehensive modernization, as their simpler systems would require less integration work when replaced with entirely new components. By midday, he had a clear picture of the inventory's composition and condition. With this information, they could refine their bid strategy and upgrade plans. The helicopter returned him to DSD headquarters by late afternoon, where he spent several more hours in technical discussions with their engineering team. When he finally checked his phone, he found a dozen missed calls and messages from his consortium partners, all seeking updates on the DSD meeting. He arranged a video conference for that evening from his hotel room. The reactions were mixed when he outlined DSD's proposal. $50 million is serious backing, Martinez said, impressed, and their technical resources would accelerate the prototype development significantly. Karen Reynolds was more cautious. What happens to our intellectual property? My fire control system design represents years of proprietary development. The agreement protects existing IP, Harrington assured her. DSD gets licensing rights for the integrated system, but individual components remain the property of their developers. The discussion continued for over an hour, addressing concerns and evaluating the partnership's pros and cons. The consensus gradually formed. DSD's backing significantly increased their chances of acquiring the tanks and successfully executing the modernization program. "I'm in if you are, Thunder," Martinez said finally. "This might be our last chance to keep American tank expertise alive in the private sector." The others voiced similar support, looking to Harrington for the final decision. "Then we move forwards," he said decisively. "I'll contact Ramirez in the morning to accept their offer." Before ending the call, he updated them on his findings at Sierra and the intelligence about Cortex's interest in the A3 variants. "That actually helps us," Karen noted. "The A1 models are cheaper and better suited for our full modernization approach anyway." The next morning, Harrington signed the preliminary agreement with DSD. Events began moving rapidly after that. DSD dispatched a technical team to Arizona to begin work on the test vehicle due to arrive from Fort Bliss. Harrington spent 3 more days at their Virginia facility, working with engineers to finalize specifications for the modernization packages. By the time he returned to Thunderbolt Armor Works, the workshop had been transformed. New equipment had arrived, temporary workstations had been set up, and a team of DSD engineers was already present, preparing for the test vehicle's arrival. Miguel showed him the changes with barely contained excitement. "They upgraded everything, boss. New diagnostic systems, fabrication equipment, even a 3D modeling station. We can do in hours what used to take days." The M60A3 from Fort Bliss arrived the following morning on a heavy transport trailer. Despite decades in museum storage, the tank looked formidable, its olive drab paint still bearing the unit markings of its last active duty assignment. "Hello, old friend," Harrington murmured, running a hand along the cast turret as the tank was unloaded. The familiar shape brought back memories of his early career, training in tanks just like this one, before the Abrams replaced them in frontline units. The work began immediately. Martinez and his team took charge of the power plant replacement, removing the original Continental AVDS 1790 engine to make way for the much more powerful MTU 883. Karen Reynolds arrived with specialists from her company to begin preparations for the fire control system upgrades. Harrington found himself shifting between roles: technical consultant one moment, project manager the next, then diplomat when disagreements arose between the various teams. It was exhausting but exhilarating work, reminiscent of the best days of his military career. The engine transplant proved more challenging than anticipated. The MTU 883 generated significantly more heat than the original power plant, requiring extensive modifications to the cooling system and engine compartment ventilation. "We're hitting thermal management issues," Martinez reported after 3 days of testing. "During extended high-output operation, we're seeing temperatures that could affect reliability." Harrington studied the thermal imaging data. "What about a dual-loop cooling system? Separate circuits for the engine block and transmission?" Martinez considered this. "Could work. We'd need to fabricate custom heat exchangers, but it would give us better thermal control." They brought in a thermal management specialist from DSD, who validated the approach. The modified cooling system was designed, fabricated, and installed within a week, a process that would have taken months without DSD's resources. Meanwhile, Karen's team made rapid progress on the fire control system integration. The compact FCSX unit fit neatly into the space formerly occupied by the analog fire control computer, with new displays for the gunner and tank commander, providing dramatically improved situational awareness. "We've increased first-round hit probability by over 300%, Karen reported during a test firing session at a nearby desert range. The thermal imaging system can detect and identify targets at over 4,000 meters, even through smoke and light dust." The demonstration was impressive. From a stationary position, the upgraded M60 consistently hit targets the size of a tank turret at ranges that would have been nearly impossible with the original fire control system. "Now let's try it on the move," Harrington suggested. This was where the original M60 had struggled compared to more modern designs. Its stabilization system was rudimentary, making accurate fire while moving a challenge even for experienced crews. Karen nodded to her technician, who activated the enhanced stabilization system. The test driver put the tank into motion, accelerating to 25 mph across the uneven desert terrain. Inside the turret, the gun maintained its aim point with remarkable steadiness, compensating for the hull's movement in real time. When the gunner fired, the round struck within a meter of the target center. Exceptional accuracy for a moving tank engagement. That's revolutionary, Harrington said, genuine admiration in his voice. You've transformed this tank's combat capability. The next phase involved armor upgrades. The original M60 design relied on cast homogeneous steel armor, effective in its day but vulnerable to modern anti-tank weapons. The modernization plan called for add-on composite armor panels and explosive reactive armor blocks on critical areas. Miguel coordinated with armor specialists from DSD and several veteran-owned businesses specializing in military vehicle protection systems. The challenge was balancing increased protection with weight constraints. Too much additional armor would strain the suspension system and reduce mobility. We've developed a modular approach, Miguel explained, showing Harrington the computer models. Base protection package adds composite panels to the turret face and hull glacis, with ERA blocks covering the sides. For customers wanting maximum protection, we can add a second layer of composite armor, though that comes with a mobility penalty. The armor integration proceeded smoothly, with the modules designed for easy field installation and replacement. When complete, the M60 Warhorse prototype featured a distinctive, angular appearance due to the added armor panels, making it look more modern despite its age. 23 days after the test vehicle's arrival, the baseline Warhorse prototype was ready for comprehensive evaluation. The transformation was remarkable. From the outside, the distinctive silhouette of the M60 remained recognizable, but with modern additions, the angular armor panels, new thermal sleeve on the main gun, advanced optics, and communication antennas. Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. Digital displays had replaced analog gauges. The fire control system featured touchscreens and automated target tracking, and the crew positions had been redesigned for improved ergonomics. Time for full system testing, Harrington announced to the assembled team. 2 days of mobility trials, followed by firepower demonstration and protection validation. The mobility testing revealed the value of the engine upgrade immediately. The original M60A3 had a top speed of about 30 mph and acceleration that could generously be described as leisurely. The Warhorse, with its 1,100 horsepower engine, reached nearly 45 mph on level ground and demonstrated significantly improved acceleration and hill climbing ability. Power-to-weight ratio is now comparable to the M1A2 Abrams, Martinez reported with evident satisfaction. And fuel efficiency is actually better thanks to the modern engine management system. The firepower trials were equally impressive. The original 105 Northroy gun had been retained but fitted with an improved barrel and modern fire control system. The result was accuracy that rivaled much newer designs, with the ability to engage targets at ranges previously impossible for the M60 platform. Colonel Nassar from Jordan arrived to observe the final day of testing, accompanied by military representatives from Morocco and Taiwan. Their interest appeared genuine, with detailed questions about performance specifications, maintenance requirements, and life cycle costs. Most impressive, Colonel Harrington, Nassar commented after watching the Warhorse navigate an obstacle course while engaging multiple targets. You have created something quite remarkable, a third-generation tank with fourth-generation capabilities at a fraction of the cost of new production. The protection validation tests were conducted at a specialized facility using shaped charge warheads against armor samples representing the Warhorse configuration. While detailed results remained classified, the general conclusion was that the upgraded armor package provided protection comparable to early M1 Abrams variants against most common threat weapons. As the test program concluded, Harrington felt a growing sense of accomplishment. They had transformed a museum piece into a capable modern combat system in less than a month, proof that their concept was viable for the broader Sierra inventory. A celebration dinner was arranged at a local restaurant with teams from Thunderbolt Armor Works, DSD, and the various partner companies mingling in a rare moment of relaxation. Toasts were offered to successful tests in promising business opportunities. Harrington was stepping outside for some air when his phone rang. The screen showed Jason's number. Dad, his son's voice was tense. I'm at Creech, about to fly to Phoenix. We need to talk in person. It's about the M60 program. What's happened? Not over the phone. I'll be there in 3 hours. Meet me at your house. The call ended, leaving Harrington unsettled. He made his excuses to the celebration group and drove home, mind racing with possibilities. Jason arrived shortly before midnight, still wearing his flight suit. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and tension evident in his movements. "You need to know what's happening," he said without preamble, dropping a USB drive on the kitchen table. "I copied these files from Blackwood's secure server. It's Cortex playbook for stopping your program." Harrington stared at the drive. "You hacked your employer's server? Jason, that could be a federal offense." "I didn't hack anything. I have legitimate access for my drone integration work. I just happened to notice files related to Project Behemoth opposition strategy. When I saw your name, I looked closer." He ran a hand through his short hair. "Dad, they're planning to sabotage your prototype." "Sabotage? That's a serious accusation." "See for yourself." Jason nodded toward the drive. Harrington plugged it into his laptop. The files were comprehensive, detailed plans to undermine the M60 modernization program through multiple vectors. Legal challenges, political pressure, media manipulation, and most disturbing, technical sabotage. "They've got someone inside your operation," Jason explained, pointing to an email exchange. "Someone feeding them information about the test program and technical vulnerabilities." Harrington read the correspondence with growing anger. The insider was providing detailed reports on the Warhorse prototype's development, including specific weaknesses in the thermal management system they just resolved. "Any indication who it might be?" Jason shook his head. "The emails use code names, but it has to be someone with direct access to the technical data." That narrowed it down to about 20 people across the various teams. All had been vetted, many were veterans with security clearances, but corporate espionage was always a risk in the defense industry. "There's more," Jason continued grimly. "They're planning to demonstrate their autonomous M60 concept next week. It's time to coincide with the final Sierra auction bids." The strategic timing was obvious. Create buzz around their unmanned concept just as the acquisition decision was being made. If Pentagon officials were impressed by the demonstration, it could influence the auction outcome. "We need to identify the insider," Harrington decided, "and accelerate our own timeline. If Cortec is demonstrating next week, we need to counter with our own showcase." Jason hesitated. "Dad, you should know, Blackwood suspects I've accessed these files. I've probably burned my career at Cortec, possibly in the defense industry entirely." The implication hung in the air. Jason had risked his professional future to warn his father, a dramatic change from their strained relationship of recent years. "Why, Jason, why risk your career for this?" His son was quiet for a long moment. "I heard Blackwood talking about you. The contempt in his voice, the personal vendetta he's pursuing. This isn't business for him. It's about destroying you specifically." He met his father's gaze directly. "Whatever our differences, you're still my father. I couldn't stand by and watch him sabotage something you believe in so deeply." The admission hit Harrington with unexpected force. Despite their disagreements about military doctrine and the future of warfare, the family bond remained. "Thank you," he said simply. "This information could save the program." Jason nodded. "I need to get back before anyone notices I'm gone. Be careful, Dad. Blackwood plays to win, regardless of the rules." After Jason departed, Harrington spent hours reviewing the files, identifying vulnerabilities and making plans to counter Cortex strategies. By dawn, he had compiled a list of possible insider candidates and protective measures to implement immediately. He called an emergency security meeting at the workshop for IRO 800, including only Miguel, Martinez, Karen, and the DSD security chief. After briefing them on the situation, they developed a plan to identify the spy. "We need to feed different information to different teams," Karen suggested. "Customized technical details that we can trace if they leak." The DSD security chief nodded. "Classic canary trap. We'll create variants of the next phase technical plans, with subtle differences for each team member. Meanwhile, we accelerate the demonstration timeline," Harrington added. "If Cortec is showcasing next week, we need to be ready with our own event, preferably before theirs." Martinez looked concerned. "We haven't completed the turret drive modifications or the auxiliary power unit installation. We'd be demonstrating an incomplete prototype." "Then we focus on what works best, mobility and firepower. Show the speed, acceleration, and targeting capabilities. Save the full systems integration for later." They dispersed to implement the security measures and accelerate the demonstration preparations. Harrington remained behind with Miguel, who had been unusually quiet during the meeting. "Something on your mind, Miguel?" The shop foreman shifted uncomfortably. "Just thinking about who the insider might be. I've known most of these people for years. Hard to imagine any of them betraying the project." Harrington understood his concern. People have different motivations. Money, ideology, coercion, ego. There are many reasons someone might share information. What's our timeline now? 5 days to prepare for a demonstration. I'm contacting Colonel Nassar and the other potential customers, plus key Pentagon officials. We need to make a statement before Cortex shows their autonomous version. The next several days passed in a blur of activity. The workshop operated around the clock, with teams working in shifts to complete critical upgrades. Harrington barely slept, dividing his time between technical oversight, security monitoring, and demonstration planning. 3 days in, the canary trap yielded results. One of the DSD engineers, a recent hire named Paul Mercer, was caught attempting to transmit modified technical data to an external server. When confronted, he initially denied everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. Cortec offered to triple my salary, he finally admitted under questioning. All I had to do was provide regular updates on the project. The DSD security team took him into custody and began damage assessment. The good news was that Mercer had only had access to certain subsystems, not the complete technical package. The bad news was that one of the systems he'd worked on was the engine cooling solution, precisely where Martinez had identified thermal management issues. They could be targeting the cooling system, Martinez warned. If it fails during the demonstration, it would be catastrophic for the program's credibility. Harrington ordered a complete inspection of all systems Mercer had accessed, particularly focusing on the thermal management components. The inspection revealed subtle modifications to the cooling system control software that would have caused the engine to overheat during extended operation, exactly the scenario planned for their demonstration. Clever, Martinez admitted as they examined the compromised code. It would have looked like a design flaw rather than sabotage. The cooling system was repaired, the control software restored to its original configuration, and additional security measures implemented to prevent further tampering. With the immediate threat addressed, preparations for the demonstration continued at an accelerated pace. 2 days before the scheduled event, Harrington received an unexpected visitor. Senator Howard Williams arrived unannounced at the workshop, accompanied by 2 aides. Tall, distinguished with silver hair and the confident bearing of a career politician, he surveyed the activity with poorly concealed disdain. "Colonel Harrington," he said coolly, "it's been some time." Harrington maintained a professional demeanor despite the history between them. "Senator Williams, this is a surprise. I'm conducting oversight for the Armed Services Committee. Given the significant interest in the Sierra inventory, we're evaluating all potential bidders." His gaze swept across the workshop, noting the prototype tank and the various technical stations. "Your operation seems modest compared to Cortex facilities." "We focus on quality rather than scale, Senator. Would you like to see what we've accomplished with the prototype?" Williams nodded curtly. "That's why I'm here." Harrington led him through the workshop, explaining the modernization approach and the performance improvements they'd achieved. Williams listened with practiced political attention, occasionally asking questions that revealed both his technical knowledge and his skepticism. As they completed the tour, Williams gestured for his aides to wait outside, leaving him alone with Harrington beside the prototype tank. "Catherine would have turned 50 next month," he said abruptly. The mention of Harrington's late wife caught him off guard. "Yes, she would have. She believed in you, even when I thought she was making a mistake. Said you had integrity, even if your methods were unorthodox." Williams studied the tank, not meeting Harrington's eyes. "Cortec has an impressive autonomous tank program, very much in line with the Pentagon's unmanned systems priority. Tanks need crews, Senator. Human judgment, human courage, human responsibility. Some decisions shouldn't be delegated to algorithms." Williams turned to face him directly. "You sound like Catherine. She always believes some things should remain in human hands." He hesitated. "I've reviewed your modernization proposal. It's more conservative than Cortex's approach, but possibly more practical for certain allies." Harrington wasn't sure where this was going. "We believe there's a significant market for upgraded conventional tanks among nations that can't afford the latest generation systems." "Perhaps." Williams straightened his jacket. "The committee will be attending both your demonstration and Cortex next week. I suggest you make a compelling case for your approach, Colonel." He started to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Jason visited me last week, said some interesting things about Richard Blackwood and his personal vendetta against you." With that cryptic remark, the senator departed, leaving Harrington to wonder if he had just encountered an enemy or a potential ally. The final day before the demonstration was consumed with rehearsals and last-minute adjustments. The guest list had grown significantly, now including not only international customers, but also Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, and defense industry analysts. Harrington supervised the full practice run, with the Warhorse executing mobility maneuvers and engaging simulated targets. The performance was impressive, the tank accelerating rapidly across desert terrain, the main gun striking targets with precision even while moving at speed. As the sun set on the eve of the demonstration, Harrington stood watching technicians make final adjustments to the fire control system. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from a number he didn't recognize. Cortec demonstration sabotaged, Blackwood blaming you, security increase for tomorrow. The warning was anonymous but concerning. If Blackwood believed Harrington was behind any problems with the Cortec demonstration, he might take more aggressive action against the Warhorse event. Miguel, Harrington called to his shop foreman, double the security for tonight and tomorrow. No one goes near the prototype without direct authorization from me or Karen. As darkness fell over the desert, Thunderbolt Armor Works transformed from a hive of technical activity to a secured facility with armed guards patrolling the perimeter and monitoring the prototype tank. Whatever happened tomorrow would shape not just the future of the M60 modernization program, but potentially the direction of American armored warfare doctrine for years to come. Chapter 5, The Test of Fire. Dawn broke clear and cool over the Arizona desert, the rising sun casting long shadows across the test range. Harrington had been awake for hours, reviewing every aspect of the demonstration plan and security arrangements. The stakes couldn't be higher. Success today would position them as legitimate contenders for the Sierra inventory. Failure would likely end their bid before the auction even began. The Warhorse prototype sat in its starting position, engines quiet but systems powered up for final diagnostics. Fresh desert camouflage paint had been applied the previous evening, making the upgraded M60 look both formidable and professional. Technicians moved around it with practiced efficiency, checking systems and making minute adjustments. All systems nominal, Karen reported, looking up from her diagnostic tablet. Fire control, engine management, communications, everything's in the green. Martinez emerged from the engine compartment, wiping his hands on a rag. Cooling system is performing perfectly. No sign of tampering since the security measures were implemented. Harrington nodded, satisfied but not relaxed. Keep vigilant. Blackwood wouldn't give up after one failed attempt. Guests would begin arriving in 2 hours. The demonstration was structured to highlight the Warhorse's capabilities. First, mobility trials to showcase the upgraded power plant, then stationary firing demonstrations, culminating in firing on the move exercises that would demonstrate the integrated performance of all systems. Miguel approached with a satellite phone. "Boss, call for you, it's your son." Harrington took the secure line, moving away from the others. "Jason, everything okay?" "Not really." Jason's voice was tight with tension. Cortex demonstration is in chaos. Someone modified the autonomous control system. When they activated it this morning, the tank started executing random maneuvers, nearly hit a group of observers. "Any injuries?" "Minor, but the PR damage is severe." Blackwood is furious, telling everyone it was industrial sabotage. Jason paused. "Dad, he specifically named you and DSD as the likely culprits." Harrington's jaw tightened. "We had nothing to do with it." "I know that, but Blackwood is convincing. He's demanding an FBI investigation and trying to get your demonstration shut down pending the outcome." This explained the warning text from the previous evening. "Any chance of that happening?" "I don't think so." Senator Williams intervened, said both demonstrations should proceed as planned, but Blackwood is coming to your event with a team of technical observers. Claims it's to ensure fair competition, but really they're looking for any mistake they can magnify. "Let them watch," Harrington said confidently. "The Warhorse will speak for itself." After ending the call, Harrington briefed the core team on the situation. Their reactions ranged from concern to determination. But all agreed the demonstration would proceed exactly as planned, with no compromises in the face of Cortex scrutiny. By mid-morning, vehicles began arriving at the test range. Military attachés from various allies, Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, defense industry analysts. The audience was larger and more influential than they had anticipated. Senator Williams arrived with his entourage, followed shortly by a Cortec delegation led by Richard Blackwood himself. Blackwood made a point of approaching Harrington directly, his smile cold and predatory. Impressive turnout, Colonel. I hope your demonstration is more controlled than ours was this morning. I'm sorry to hear about your technical difficulties, Harrington replied evenly. Autonomous systems can be unpredictable, particularly when sabotaged, Blackwood countered, his voice hardening. But we'll discuss that matter another time. Today I'm simply an interested observer. As Blackwood moved away to join the VIP section, Eleanor Ramirez from DSD appeared at Harrington's side. Don't let him rattle you. Our legal team is already preparing responses to his sabotage allegations. He's the least of my concerns right now, Harrington assured her. The warhorse is ready. It will perform. At precisely 1100 hours, Harrington stepped onto a small podium to address the gathered observers. Microphones carried his voice across the viewing area, where attendees sat beneath canopies that provided shade from the intensifying desert sun. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. What you're about to witness is the resurrection of a legend, the M60 main battle tank, reimagined for the modern battlefield. He outlined the modernization philosophy briefly, emphasizing cost-effectiveness, reliability, and compatibility with existing logistics systems. Then, with a nod to the test range controller, he gave the signal to begin. The warhorse's turbocharged diesel engine roared to life, its deep rumble carrying across the desert. The tank began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as it entered the mobility course. The acceleration was impressive, far beyond what any M60 had been capable of in its original configuration. The tank navigated obstacles with agility that belied its 50-ton weight, climbing steep grades, crossing trenches, pivoting in tight turns. Throughout the demonstration, a large screen showed key performance metrics: speed, horsepower output, torque, and comparison data with the original M60A3 specifications. Top speed increased by 42%, Harrington narrated, as the tank reached its maximum velocity across a straight section. Power-to-weight ratio comparable to the latest generation main battle tanks, but at one-third the acquisition cost. The mobility demonstration concluded with the warhorse climbing a 60-degree slope, a gradient that would have challenged even the most modern tanks. When it crested the hill and turned to face the observers, spontaneous applause broke out among some of the military attendees who appreciated the technical achievement. Next came the firepower demonstration. The warhorse took position on the firing line, its 105mm main gun traversing smoothly as it acquired targets at various ranges. The fire control demonstration included both stationary and moving targets, with the upgraded system achieving hit rates that matched or exceeded those of much newer designs. The fire control system features third-generation thermal imaging, automated target tracking, and a ballistic computer that accounts for 27 variables affecting shot trajectory, Karen explained to the observers. First-round hit probability is increased by over 300% compared to the original system. Senator Williams watched with undisguised interest, occasionally making notes or leaning to whisper questions to his military aide. Blackwood and his core tech team observed with professional detachment, though their intense scrutiny suggested they were looking for any flaw in the performance. The final phase combined mobility and firepower, the most challenging test for any tank. The warhorse accelerated across uneven terrain while engaging multiple targets at different ranges, demonstrating the stabilization system's effectiveness under real-world conditions. Everything was proceeding flawlessly when Harrington noticed something concerning. A thin trail of white smoke was emerging from the engine's chester deck, barely visible, but definitely abnormal. Martinez saw it too, his expression changing from pride to alarm in an instant. "Possible coolant leak," he muttered over the radio. "System pressure is fluctuating." Harrington faced a critical decision. They could abort the demonstration, which would raise questions and possibly confirm Blackwood's narrative about their technical readiness. Or they could continue, risking a more serious failure if the issue worsened. "Can it complete the course?" he asked Martinez. A moment of tense silence followed as Martinez consulted the telemetry data. "Yes, but we need to modify the final sequence. Reduce power demands by 20% to manage thermal load." Harrington gave the order to continue, instructing the driver to adjust the performance profile for the remaining maneuvers. The change was subtle, a slight reduction in acceleration, gentler turns, but still demonstrated the tank's capabilities while managing the developing issue. Most observers wouldn't notice the difference, but Harrington saw Blackwood's satisfied smirk. The Cortex CEO had spotted the smoke and recognized the implications. Despite the coolant issue, the Warhorse completed the demonstration successfully, returning to the starting position to applause from the audience. As the engine shut down, maintenance crews immediately moved in, ostensibly for routine post-operation procedures, but actually to address the cooling system problem before it became visually obvious. Harrington proceeded with the post-demonstration briefing, highlighting the performance improvements and cost benefits, while technical teams worked frantically to identify the source of the coolant leak. Colonel Nassar and the other international observers asked detailed questions about maintenance requirements, logistics support, and upgrade timelines. Senator Williams approached as the formal presentation concluded. Impressive demonstration, Colonel, particularly how you handled the technical adjustment toward the end. So he had noticed the issue. Harrington decided honesty was the best approach. Minor coolant pressure fluctuations, Senator, already being addressed by our maintenance team. Williams nodded. Prototypes always have teething problems. What matters is how you respond to them. He glanced toward Blackwood, who was speaking animatedly with a group of Pentagon officials. Some believe the future of armored warfare lies in removing humans from the equation entirely. I'm not convinced that's the right approach for all situations. Neither am I, Senator. There's a place for both manned and unmanned systems on the modern battlefield. Perhaps. Williams studied Harrington thoughtfully. My committee will be making recommendations regarding the Sierra inventory disposition next week. Both approaches have merit, but I'm increasingly concerned about concentrating too much strategic capability in any single contractor. The implication was clear. Williams was considering supporting a split disposition of the Sierra inventory, with some tanks going to Cortec and others to the Thunderbolt consortium. A diverse industrial base serves the national interest, Harrington agreed carefully. Williams almost smiled. Indeed it does, Colonel. Indeed it does. He extended his hand. Catherine would have been proud of what you've accomplished here. The unexpected compliment caught Harrington off guard. He shook the senator's hand, wordlessly accepting what seemed to be a personal and professional olive branch. As Williams departed, Martinez approached with news about the coolant issue. We found the problem. Secondary coolant line fitting was deliberately loosened. Would have failed completely in another 10 minutes. Sabotage? Martinez nodded grimly. Had to be. That fitting was torqued to spec and safety wired yesterday. Someone tampered with it this morning. Blackwood, Harrington muttered, watching the Cortex CEO across the viewing area. Maybe, but we have no proof. And the demonstration was still successful despite their efforts. Indeed, the international observers were clustered around the Warhorse, examining its features with evident interest. Colonel Nassar caught Harrington's eye and gave a subtle nod of approval. The Jordanian officer later confirmed that his country was prepared to place an initial order for 20 upgraded tanks, subject to successful completion of operational testing. The Moroccan and Taiwanese delegations expressed similar interest, though with smaller initial quantities. By the end of the day, potential orders totaled 45 tanks, a strong validation of the concept, though still contingent on acquiring the Sierra inventory. As the visitors departed and the technical team secured the prototype, Harrington received another call from Jason. You did it, his son said without preamble. Even with the coolant issue, the demonstration was impressive. Word spreading through Pentagon channels already. How's Blackwood taking it? Not well. He's doubled down on the sabotage allegations, but they're gaining little traction. Too many witnesses saw his autonomous demonstration fail spectacularly this morning. Jason paused. There's something else you should know. The auction parameters have changed. Harrington tensed. Changed how? The inventory is being split into 3 lots. A1 variants, A3 variants, and support vehicles, separate bids for each lot. This was a significant development and potentially advantageous. If Cortec was primarily interested in the A3 variants for their autonomous conversion program, the consortium might face less competition for the more numerous A1 tanks. That's actually good news for us, Harrington replied. Our modernization approach works better with the A1 variants anyway. There's more, Jason continued. Minimum bids have been established for each lot, but they're lower than expected. Word is the Army wants these tanks out of storage quickly to free up the facility for newer equipment. Lower minimum bids meant the financial barrier to entry was reduced, improving their chances against Cortec's deeper pockets. After ending the call, Harrington shared the news with the team. The mood brightened considerably. The demonstration had been successful despite sabotage attempts. Potential customers were expressing serious interest, and the auction parameters now favored their approach. We focus on the A1 lot, Harrington decided. That gives us the largest number of tanks at the lowest acquisition cost, maximizing our upgrade potential. The strategy made sense to everyone. With DSD's financial backing and the demonstrated success of the Warhorse prototype, their position heading into the auction was stronger than anyone might have predicted just weeks earlier. That evening, as the team celebrated their successful demonstration, Harrington stepped outside the workshop to get some air. The desert night was cool and clear, stars visible in breathtaking clarity above the darkness. A vehicle approached slowly, headlights illuminating the gravel driveway. Harrington recognized Jason's rental car as it pulled up beside him. His son emerged, still in his Air Force uniform. "Thought I'd congratulate you in person," he said, extending his hand. Harrington pulled him into a hug instead. "Couldn't have done it without your warnings. You took a hell of a risk." Jason returned the embrace briefly before stepping back. "Worth it. Blackwood's autonomous tank program is fundamentally flawed anyway. Removes the human element that makes armored warfare effective." The statement, so aligned with Harrington's own philosophy, caught him by surprise. "Thought you were all about removing humans from harm's way." "I was." Jason looked up at the stars. "Still am in many contexts, but tanks are different. The crew dynamics, the situational awareness, the immediate decision-making. Some things can't be replicated by algorithms, at least not yet." They stood in companionable silence for a moment. "I've resigned from Cortec," Jason said finally, "effective immediately." "Because of the sabotage allegations?" Jason shook his head. "Because I realized I was on the wrong side of an important debate. About warfare, about legacy, about what matters." He met his father's gaze directly. "I've been thinking about joining the consortium. My drone integration expertise could be valuable for your modernization program." The offer represented more than just technical assistance. It was a bridge across the generational and philosophical divide that had separated them for years. "We could use your expertise," Harrington said carefully. "But are you sure? This is a major career change." "I'm sure." Jason's expression was resolute. "Some legacies are worth preserving, even as we move into the future." The words echoed Harrington's own thoughts about the M60 modernization program, honoring the past while embracing the future, preserving human skill and judgment in an increasingly automated world. As father and son walked back toward the workshop together, Harrington felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any technical success. The Warhorse prototype had performed admirably despite sabotage attempts. Potential customers were expressing serious interest. The auction parameters now favored their approach. But most importantly, the project had built a bridge between past and future, between generations, between competing visions of warfare. Whatever happened at the auction, that alone made the effort worthwhile. Chapter C, The Enemy Within. The morning after the demonstration, Harrington convened an emergency security meeting. Martinez, Karen, Miguel, Jason, and the DSD security chief gathered in the workshop's small conference room. Faces grave as Harrington outlined the sabotage evidence. "The coolant line tampering was deliberate and sophisticated," he explained, displaying photos of the modified fitting. "Designed to cause a catastrophic failure at the most damaging moment of our demonstration." "But who?" Karen asked the question on everyone's mind. "We caught Mercer, the DSD plant. Who else had access to the prototype?" The DSD security chief spread access logs across the table. 23 people had authorized access to the engine compartment during the pre-demonstration preparations. All have been with their respective companies for years, so all have security clearances. Which means either someone with legitimate access was turned, or someone gained unauthorized access despite our security measures, Harrington concluded. Jason studied the maintenance records. "The timing is important. The sabotage had to happen after the final checks yesterday evening, but before the demonstration this morning." Miguel shook his head. "We had guards on the prototype all night. No one approached it without authorization." "Then it has to be someone who had legitimate access during the morning preparations," Martinez said, his expression hardening. "As someone on one of our teams." The realization cast a pall over the room. The idea that one of their own, perhaps someone they had worked alongside for weeks, was deliberately undermining the project was deeply disturbing. "We need to identify them before the auction," Harrington decided. "With bids due in 5 days, we can't risk further sabotage or intelligence leaks." The DSD security chief proposed a comprehensive approach, reviewing all security footage, conducting discrete background checks on all personnel who had access, implementing stricter compartmentalization of sensitive information, and establishing a counterintelligence operation to feed controlled information to potential suspects. Meanwhile, we proceed with the auction preparations, Harrington instructed. Jason, you'll work with Karen on integrating drone support capabilities into the modernization package. Martinez, focus on resolving the coolant issue permanently. Miguel, coordinate with DSD on the production planning for initial orders. As the others dispersed to their assignments, Harrington remained with the security chief to review personnel files. They spent hours examining backgrounds, financial records, and recent activities of everyone with access to the prototype. By mid-afternoon, they had narrowed the list of suspects to 3 individuals who had both opportunity and potential motivation. One had significant debts that had recently been paid off. Another had an ex-spouse working for a Cortex subsidiary. The third had been passed over for promotion multiple times and expressed bitter comments about company leadership. We monitor all 3, the security chief recommended, and we feed them different versions of our auction strategy. See which version makes its way to Cortex. Harrington agreed with the approach. While the counterintelligence operation proceeded, preparations for the auction continued at an accelerated pace. The final bid package took shape, focusing on the A1 variant lot with a smaller secondary bid for support vehicles. DSD finalized the financial arrangements, committing $50 million for the acquisition, while the consortium partners secured production facilities and supply chains for the modernization program. Letters of intent from Jordan, Morocco, and Taiwan were included with the bid to demonstrate market interest. 3 days before the auction, their counterintelligence operation yielded results. Michael Collins, a logistics manager from one of the partner companies, was observed photographing bid documents with his personal phone and later making a call from a burner phone purchased with cash. Electronic surveillance, hurriedly authorized through DSD's security connections, confirmed he was reporting to a Cortex representative. Confronted with the evidence, Collins initially denied everything, but faced with potential prosecution for industrial espionage, he eventually confessed. Cortex had approached him 6 months earlier, offering to pay off his underwater mortgage in exchange for information on competing defense projects. "I never meant to damage anything," he insisted, his face ashen. "They just wanted information. The coolant line. That wasn't me." Either he was lying or there was still another saboteur within their operation. The DSD security chief recommended keeping Collins under observation rather than exposing the counterintelligence operation immediately. They would feed him controlled information while continuing to investigate the sabotage incident. The auction deadline approached with the saboteur still unidentified. Enhanced security measures were implemented around all sensitive activities, with dual authentication required for any system modifications and continuous video monitoring of the prototype. On the eve of the auction, Harrington worked late in his office, reviewing the final bid documents. The proposal was comprehensive, detailed modernization plans for each tank variant, production timelines, cost projections, and supporting letters from potential customers and retired military leaders. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. Miguel entered, holding a tablet computer. "Boss, you need to see this. Security camera footage from the night before the demonstration." The video showed the workshop floor at 0247 hours, dimly lit by security lighting. The prototype sat in the center of the frame, apparently unattended. After several seconds of normal footage, a figure emerged from the shadows, moving with purpose toward the tank's engine compartment. "Who is that?" Harrington asked, leaning closer to the screen. Miguel enhanced the image, but the figure was wearing a hooded sweatshirt that obscured their face. "Can't tell from this angle, but watch what happens next." The figure reached the tank and began working on the engine access panel. As they did, they glanced up toward one of the security cameras. For just a moment, their face was visible. Harrington froze the image, staring in disbelief. "That's not possible." The face belonged to Thomas Martinez. "I found this while reviewing old security footage," Miguel explained, his voice tight with anger. The file was buried in an encrypted partition on the security server. Someone tried to delete it. Harrington struggled to process the implications. Martinez had been with the project from the beginning, a trusted colleague and friend. The idea that he would deliberately sabotage their work seemed inconceivable. "There has to be an explanation," Harrington insisted. "Martinez designed the cooling system. Why would he sabotage his own work?" "Money, pressure, blackmail," Miguel suggested. "Whatever the reason, we have to confront him. The auction is tomorrow. If he's working for Cortex, he could still damage our bid." Harrington studied the frozen image again, looking for any indication it might be falsified or misidentified. But the face was unmistakably Martinez's, caught in the camera's unblinking eye. Where is he now? His team is finishing the coolant system modifications. Should be in the main bay. Harrington grabbed his phone and called the security chief, instructing him to quietly secure the workshop and detain Martinez for questioning. Then he and Miguel headed toward the main bay, sick with the knowledge that one of their core team members might have betrayed them. They found Martinez exactly where expected, directing a team installing upgraded heat exchangers on the prototype's cooling system. He looked up as Harrington approached, wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag. Almost done here, Thunder. The new system should prevent any... He stopped mid-sentence, noticing the security personnel entering the bay. What's going on? Harrington gestured toward a private office off the main floor. We need to talk, privately. Martinez followed, confusion evident on his face. Once inside, Harrington closed the door and played the security footage without comment. The color drained from Martinez's face as he watched. When the video ended, he sank into a chair, shoulders slumped. It's not what you think, he said quietly. Then explain it, Harrington demanded, anger and disappointment warring in his voice. Explain why you were tampering with the prototype at 3 in the morning before the most important demonstration of our program. Martinez took a deep breath. I was fixing sabotage, not causing it. What? I couldn't sleep that night, so I came back to the workshop to run some final checks on the cooling system. When I got here, I found that someone had modified the control software to create a pressure spike during sustained high-output operation. Harrington exchanged a glance with Miguel. Why didn't you report it? I did, Martinez insisted. I called the security desk and reported finding the modification. They said they'd investigate while I fixed the software. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. But then I found the hardware tampering too, the loose fitting. I fixed that as well, torqued it to spec and safety wired it like it was supposed to be. I assumed security would review the footage and identify whoever did it. The fitting failed during the demonstration, Miguel pointed out. If you fixed it, how did that happen? Martinez looked genuinely bewildered. That's impossible. I checked it myself, unless... His expression changed to one of dawning comprehension. Unless someone tampered with it again after I left. The security chief had been quietly checking Martinez's story. He entered the office with a tablet of his own. There's a record of Martinez calling the security desk at 231 hours, reporting suspicious software modifications. The duty officer logged it and said he'd review camera footage. Who was the duty officer? Harrington asked. The security chief checked the log. Paul Reynolds. Miguel frowned. Reynolds wasn't scheduled that night. He switched shifts with Garcia at the last minute. They quickly pulled Reynolds' personnel file. He had joined the security team just 2 weeks before the prototype arrived with seemingly impeccable credentials, military background, security clearance, relevant experience. Run a deep background check, Harrington instructed, and find Reynolds now. But Reynolds had disappeared. His apartment was empty, his phone disconnected. The background check revealed sophisticated identity fraud. Paul Reynolds didn't exist before 2 months ago. Professional job, the security chief concluded. Corporate espionage, possibly with intelligence community connections, the kind of operation Cortec could afford. Martinez had been telling the truth. He had discovered sabotage and attempted to fix it, only for the false security officer to allow the saboteur another opportunity to tamper with the tank. I owe you an apology, Harrington told Martinez. No need, Martinez assured him. I'd have suspected me too, given that footage. With the immediate crisis resolved and Martinez exonerated, attention returned to the auction preparations. The final bid documents were compiled, encrypted, and prepared for submission through the Pentagon secure procurement system. As midnight approached, Harrington, Jason, and the core team gathered in the conference room for the electronic submission. The atmosphere was tense but determined. Months of work, millions in investment, and the future of American tank modernization hanging in the balance. Ready? Harrington asked, finger poised over the submit button. Nods all around. He pressed enter, and their bid package was transmitted to the procurement office. A confirmation message appeared moments later. Bid received. Confirmation number A17734M60. Now we wait, Harrington said quietly. The auction results would be announced within 48 hours. 2 days of uncertainty, during which Cortec would undoubtedly be applying every bit of political pressure and influence they could muster. As the team dispersed, Jason remained behind with his father. Whatever happens with the auction, "What you've accomplished here is remarkable," he said. "You've proven the concept, secured international customers, and assembled a team of experts that Cortec can't match." Harrington appreciated his son's support, but knew the truth. Without the Sierra inventory, the modernization program would be limited to small-scale conversions of tanks purchased on the international market. The economics wouldn't work, the potential impact would be minimized, and most of the team would eventually drift to other projects. The next morning brought unexpected news from DSD headquarters. Cortec had filed a formal protest with the Defense Department's procurement office, claiming irregularities in the auction process. Specifically, they alleged that the decision to split the inventory into separate lots was designed to favor smaller bidders at the expense of comprehensive solutions. The protest could delay the auction results by weeks or even months, time that Cortec would use to advance their autonomous tank program and potentially secure exclusive development contracts with the Pentagon. "It's a delaying tactic," Eleanor Ramirez explained during an emergency video conference. "They know the autonomous demonstration failure hurt them. They're buying time to recover and build political support." "Can they succeed?" Harrington asked. "Possibly. They have a significant influence in certain Pentagon circles. But we're not without resources ourselves. DSD has been working military channels, emphasizing the export potential of the modernization program." Senator Williams also weighed in, contacting Harrington directly. "Cortec's protest won't succeed," he stated flatly. "The committee has determined that diversification of the defense industrial base is in the national interest. The auction will proceed as structured." The senator's confidence was reassuring, but Harrington remained concerned. Blackwood had demonstrated his willingness to use any means necessary to achieve his goals: legal challenges, political pressure, industrial espionage, and outright sabotage. What other tactics might he employ in these final hours? The answer came that evening in the form of breaking news on major networks. Defense contractor accused of export control violations. The stories, clearly planted by Cortec sources, alleged that Thunderbolt Armor Works and its partners had engaged in unauthorized technical discussions with foreign governments regarding controlled weapon systems. Though the allegations were carefully phrased as under investigation rather than proven, the implication was clear. The consortium was risking national security for profit. It was a powerful narrative, one that could resonate with decision-makers concerned about technology transfer. DSD's legal team responded immediately, issuing statements clarifying that all international discussions had been properly authorized and documented. They emphasized that the modernization program involved no classified technologies and would be subject to standard export controls like any defense program. But the damage was being done. Financial markets reacted, with DSD's stock price dropping on concerns about potential regulatory issues. Political allies began distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with export control controversies even if unproven. "Blackwood's going nuclear," Jason observed grimly. "He knows he's losing on the merits, so he's trying to poison the well." Harrington had faced desperate adversaries before, on actual battlefields where the stakes were life and death. He recognized Blackwood's tactics for what they were: the last desperate moves of someone who saw defeat approaching. "We stay the course," he decided. "The auction committee has all the facts. They know these allegations are baseless." The final hours before the auction results ticked by with excruciating slowness. The team maintained a vigil at the workshop, monitoring news coverage and responding to inquiries from concerned partners. Martinez and his team continued working on the prototype, refusing to be distracted by the political machinations. At precisely 1700 hours Eastern Time, the procurement office's secure system updated with the auction results. Harrington and the core team gathered around the conference room screen, tension palpable as the page loaded. The results appeared in stark official language. Lot A1, M60A1 variants, 512 units. Awarded to Thunderbolt Armor Consortium. Lot A3, 60A3 variants, 217 units. Awarded to Cortec Defense Lot S1, support vehicles and spares. Awarded to Thunderbolt Armor Consortium. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the realization hit. They had won. Not the entire inventory, but the majority of it, including the A1 variants that were best suited for their comprehensive modernization approach. Spontaneous cheers erupted around the table. Handshakes and backslaps followed, the relief and triumph washing away weeks of stress and uncertainty. "We did it," Martinez said, grinning broadly. 512 tanks. Plus all the support vehicles and spares, Miguel added. That's huge for the maintenance program. Harrington allowed himself a moment to absorb the victory. They had faced a larger, better-funded adversary with political connections and ruthless tactics, and prevailed. David had indeed defeated Goliath. His phone rang almost immediately. It was Eleanor Ramirez from DSD. "Congratulations, Colonel," she said warmly. "The contract officers were impressed by our bid package, particularly the international letters of intent. They saw real value in keeping these tanks in active service with allies rather than scrapping them." And Cortex protest? Rejected unanimously. The split lot approach was deemed appropriate given the different potential applications for the variants. After hanging up, Harrington received another call, this one from Senator Williams. "Well played, Colonel," the senator said without preamble. "Your approach carried the day with the procurement committee. The combination of export potential, job creation, and technological relevance was compelling. Thank you for your support, Senator." "I didn't support you," Williams corrected him. "I ensured a fair process. The merits of your proposal did the rest." He paused. "Catherine would have been proud. She always believed in your ability to see possibilities others missed." The mention of his late wife stirred old emotions. "I appreciate that, Senator." As the initial euphoria settled, the team began discussing next steps. The contract would be finalized within days, after which they would have access to the Sierra inventory. Initial production planning needed to be accelerated, supply chains established, and international orders confirmed. "We should celebrate properly," Karen suggested. "This is just the beginning, but it's a milestone worth marking." Harrington agreed. They had earned a moment of celebration before the real work began, transforming hundreds of Cold War-era tanks into modern combat systems that would serve America's allies for decades to come. As the team made plans for dinner, Harrington stepped outside to get some air. The desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, a fitting end to one of the most significant days of his professional life. His phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Congratulations, Dad. You've preserved a legacy while creating something new. I'm proud to be part of it." The message encapsulated what the project had become. Not just a business venture or a technical achievement, but a bridge between generations, between tradition and innovation, between human experience and technological advancement. Harrington looked back at the workshop where the prototype sat, its silhouette distinctive against the twilight. The M60 had been America's primary battle tank during some of the Cold War's most tense moments, a steel sentinel standing guard against Soviet aggression. Now upgraded and reimagined, it would continue serving freedom's cause in a new century. Some legacies, Harrington reflected, were indeed worth preserving. Even in an age of automation and artificial intelligence, there remained a place for steel forged by human hands and guided by human judgment. The battle for the Sierra inventory was won. The larger challenge, transforming these metal behemoths into relevant modern weapons, was just beginning. But standing in the fading desert light, watching his team celebrate through the workshop windows, Harrington felt confident they would succeed. After all, they had already accomplished the impossible. The morning after the auction victory, Harrington arrived at Thunderbolt Armor Works before sunrise. The celebration had continued late into the night, but decades of military discipline had ingrained in him the habit of early rising regardless of circumstances. He wanted a quiet moment to absorb their achievement before the whirlwind of activity resumed. The workshop was silent and still, bathed in the soft amber glow of security lighting. In the center stood the Warhorse prototype, the physical embodiment of their vision for modernizing the M60 platform. Soon, this single vehicle would become the template for hundreds more, breathing new life into Cold War-era machines that many had considered obsolete. Harrington ran his hand along the tank's hull, feeling the solid American steel beneath his fingertips. Unlike newer designs with their composite materials and computer-optimized geometries, the M60 represented an earlier philosophy of armor design, straightforward, robust, maintainable in the field. There was value in that approach, especially for nations that couldn't support the complex logistics chains required by more advanced systems. His phone vibrated with an incoming message. Eleanor Ramirez from DSD, already at work despite the early hour. "Contract finalized. Access to Sierra inventory authorized effective immediately. Transportation assets being arranged." Things were moving faster than expected. The Pentagon, having made its decision, was proceeding with characteristic efficiency. The first tanks could be arriving at their facility within days. Miguel arrived next, carrying coffee for them both. Couldn't sleep either, boss. Harrington accepted the steaming cup gratefully. Too many thoughts. 500 tanks is a lot of responsibility. An opportunity, Miguel added, gazing at the prototype. This project could sustain the workshop for decades. The observation brought Harrington's thoughts to the future of Thunderbolt Armor Works itself. Under the partnership agreement, the Arizona facility would become the primary design center for the modernization program, with production distributed across multiple sites owned by consortium members. The once struggling workshop would evolve into something much larger, a center of excellence for armor modernization. We'll need to expand, Harrington mused. More space, more equipment, more personnel. Miguel nodded. Already working on plans for the adjacent property. The owner's willing to sell now that we have the contract. By mid-morning, the workshop was bustling with activity. Teams gathered around whiteboards and computer stations, developing detailed implementation plans for each aspect of the modernization program. The contract required delivery of the first upgraded tanks within 6 months, an ambitious schedule that would demand precise coordination. Karen Reynolds had brought in additional engineers to finalize the production version of the fire control system. We've identified some optimizations based on the prototype testing, she explained during the morning briefing. The production units will be more reliable and easier to install. Martinez reported similar progress with the power plant integration. We're streamlining the engine mounting system to reduce installation time. Should cut about 20 hours from each conversion. The technical challenges were formidable but manageable. The greater concern was establishing the production infrastructure to handle hundreds of tanks efficiently. DSD was converting a former aircraft factory in Oklahoma for final assembly, while various consortium partners prepared their facilities for subsystem production. Jason had taken charge of the drone integration component, a feature not included in the original prototype but considered valuable for the production version. We're developing a modular system, he explained, displaying concept renderings on the main screen. Each tank can deploy and control up to 3 reconnaissance drones, extending the crew's awareness beyond line of sight. Harrington watched with quiet pride as his son presented the technical details. Jason's expertise with unmanned systems, combined with his growing appreciation for traditional armor doctrine, represented exactly the bridge between generations that the project embodied. The morning's momentum was interrupted when Senator Williams called. Colonel, we need to discuss security arrangements for the Sierra inventory. Intelligence suggests Cortec hasn't fully accepted their partial defeat. What kind of threat are we talking about? Harrington asked, stepping away from the others. Industrial espionage, primarily. Possibly attempts to delay the transfer of vehicles. Nothing violent, but persistent. Williams paused. Blackwood is facing pressure from his board over losing the main contract. He needs to undermine your program to save his position. After the call, Harrington convened a security meeting with the consortium's leadership team. They implemented additional protective measures, armed guards at transportation hubs, secure communications for logistics coordination, and background checks for all personnel involved in the transfer operation. 3 days later, the first shipment of M60A1 tanks arrived from Sierra Army Depot, 20 vehicles transported by rail to a secure facility outside Phoenix. Harrington was present for their arrival, watching as the massive flat cars delivered their cargo under the watchful eyes of private security contractors. Despite decades in storage, the tanks were in remarkably good condition. The Army's preservation protocols had protected them from corrosion and environmental damage. Each would require thorough inspection and servicing before modernization began, but the foundations were solid. Better than we hoped, Martinez observed as they examined the first vehicle. Engines are properly preserved, hydraulics sealed, electronics protected. We won't need to replace as many baseline components as we budgeted for. This was excellent news for the program's economics. Every dollar saved on restoration meant more available for enhancements or profit margin. As the initial batch of tanks was processed through receiving inspection, Harrington divided his attention between technical oversight and program management. The contract's aggressive timeline left little room for error or delay. The operation expanded rapidly. Within 2 weeks, over 100 tanks had been transferred to various consortium facilities for processing. The former aircraft factory in Oklahoma was coming online as the final assembly center, while specialized components were being manufactured at partner sites across the country. Amidst this progress, the first serious challenge emerged: Custom composite armor panels, a critical component of the protection upgrade, were falling behind the schedule due to manufacturing difficulties. The specialized materials required precise temperature and pressure control during formation, and the production line was experiencing higher rejection rates than anticipated. We're at 40% yield instead of the projected 80%, the production manager reported during a crisis meeting. At this rate, we'll miss our first delivery milestone by 6 weeks. Harrington studied the technical data, considering options. What about the Israeli composite system? They've been producing similar panels for their Sabra upgrade for years. Different formulation, different mounting system, Martinez pointed out. We'd need to redesign the attachment points. But proven production methods, Harrington countered, and they might be willing to license the technology given our existing relationship with their defense ministry. After weighing the alternatives, they decided to pursue a dual-track approach. Continue refining their production process while opening negotiations with the Israelis for technology licensing. It was a calculated risk, but better than falling behind on deliveries. Jason took the lead on the Israeli negotiations, leveraging contacts he had developed during joint drone exercises. To everyone's surprise, the Israelis responded enthusiastically, offering not just manufacturing technology, but an improved armor formula with better protection characteristics. They see long-term value in the partnership, Jason explained, after a video conference with Tel Aviv. If our program succeeds, it demonstrates the viability of modernizing legacy platforms, which is a core business for them. The armor crisis was resolving when a more personal challenge arose. During a routine medical examination required by their insurance provider, Martinez collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors diagnosed a heart attack, mild but a serious warning sign. Harrington visited him that evening, finding his old friend propped up in a hospital bed, irritated by the forced inactivity, but otherwise in good spirits. Doctors say I need to reduce stress, Martinez reported with a grimace. Suggested I take a desk job. Can you imagine? You need to listen to them, Wrench, Harrington said seriously. The program needs you healthy. Martinez waved dismissively. I'll be back in a week. Just need some pills and to cut back on the chili dogs. But Harrington recognized the situation's gravity, even if Martinez wouldn't acknowledge it. The power plant integration team depended heavily on Martinez's expertise and leadership. His extended absence could jeopardize the entire program timeline. The solution came from an unexpected source. The following morning, Jason proposed bringing in veteran tank mechanics from the recently deactivated 5th Armored Division. Many were still transitioning to civilian careers and had extensive experience with the M60 platform from training exercises. They'd need minimal onboarding, Jason pointed out, and it supports the program's mission of preserving American armor expertise. Harrington approved the plan immediately. Within days, a dozen former Army tank mechanics had joined the power plant team, their military experience compensating for Martinez's temporary absence. The integration process actually accelerated, with the veterans suggesting practical field-tested modifications that improve serviceability. As the first quarter of production progressed, international interest in the program expanded beyond the initial customer nations. Representatives from Thailand, Brazil, and Pakistan visited the Oklahoma facility to observe the modernization process and evaluate the enhanced capabilities. Colonel Nassar returned with specific requests from the Jordanian military. Our operational environment requires additional dust protection for the engine intake and enhanced cooling for desert conditions, he explained during a technical review. We would be willing to fund these modifications for our vehicles. The request aligned perfectly with the program's modular upgrade philosophy. Harrington assigned a small team to develop the desert package, which would likely appeal to other customers operating in similar environments. Progress was steady, but not without challenges. Cortec, though formally congratulating the consortium on their contract win, continued subtle undermining efforts. They leaked selective information to defense publications questioning the modernization approach, suggesting that refurbishing Cold War relics was inferior to their autonomous platform concept. The technical community largely dismissed these critiques, recognizing them as competitive sniping rather than substantive concerns. But the public relations battle required attention nonetheless. DSD's marketing team developed a compelling narrative around proven platforms, modern capabilities, that resonated with defense officials concerned about acquisition costs and operational reliability. 4 months into the program, with production steadily increasing and the first deliveries approaching, Harrington received unexpected news from Senator Williams. The senator requested a private meeting at Thunderbolt Armor Works, arriving with minimal staff and no media presence. The Armed Services Committee is considering a supplemental appropriation, Williams announced without preamble once they were alone in Harrington's office. Additional funding for legacy platform modernization, specifically focused on allied interoperability. Harrington understood the implications immediately. "You're talking about expanding our program." Williams nodded. "The success of your initial production has impressed key committee members. There's growing recognition that affordable modernization programs serve our strategic interests by strengthening allied capabilities." How substantial an expansion? Potentially doubling the current scope. Foreign military sales funding for additional M60 acquisitions from international storage, then modernized through your consortium. Williams studied him carefully. "Can your operations scale to that level?" The question wasn't merely about production capacity, but about organizational capability. Doubling the program would transform their consortium from a significant defense contractor to a major industry player. "We can scale," Harrington confirmed after brief consideration. The modular production model was designed for expansion, but we'd need assurance of sustained funding before committing to major facility investments. "That's being addressed. A 5-year authorization is part of the proposal." Williams stood to leave. "Nothing certain yet, but prepare contingency plans. The committee votes next month." The potential expansion required careful planning. Harrington convened the consortium leadership to develop scaling strategies without compromising the existing production commitments. Additional manufacturing sites would be needed, along with a larger skilled workforce and expanded supply chains. As these discussions proceeded, Martinez returned to work on restricted duty. Though paler and thinner, his mind remained sharp and his technical judgment sound. He took on a consulting role, guiding the integration teams without the physical stress of hands-on implementation. "The veterans you brought in are impressive," he told Harrington during a lunch meeting, "especially that Sergeant Rodriguez. Reminds me of myself 20 years ago." Rodriguez had indeed emerged as a natural leader among the veteran mechanics. His practical experience with field maintenance had informed several design improvements that enhanced serviceability under combat conditions. "We're considering him for a permanent leadership position," Harrington revealed, running the field support program for deployed tanks. International deliveries were scheduled to begin the following month. Jordan would receive the first 10 modernized tanks, with Morocco and Taiwan following shortly afterward. The delivery ceremonies would attract significant media attention, the first tangible proof that the modernization program was fulfilling its promises. Preparations for these deliveries were in their final stages when disaster struck. A massive fire erupted in the Oklahoma final assembly facility, starting in the paint booth and spreading rapidly through the main production floor. Workers evacuated safely, but 15 partially upgraded tanks were damaged, along with specialized equipment and inventory. Harrington flew to the site immediately. The scene was devastating: charred equipment, water damage from fire suppression systems, and the acrid smell of burnt electronics and paint. Initial damage assessments suggested at least a 2-month production delay. "Accident or sabotage?" he asked the fire investigator bluntly. "Too early to say definitively," the investigator replied, "but the point of origin is suspicious. Paint booths have extensive fire suppression systems that should have contained any accidental ignition." Suspicion immediately fell on Cortec, but there was no direct evidence of their involvement. More troubling was the impact on the program's deliverables. The first international shipments would have to be delayed, potentially damaging customer relationships and program credibility. Eleanor Ramirez arrived from DSD headquarters to assess the situation. "We have options," she assured Harrington as they surveyed the damage. "Our Texas facility can be repurposed temporarily. It would mean delaying some other programs, but the board has authorized a shift." Within 48 hours, a comprehensive recovery plan was implemented. Undamaged tanks were transported to the Texas facility, while specialized teams began restoring the Oklahoma site. The most critical production equipment was expedited for replacement, often at premium cost to maintain schedule. Jason suggested accelerating the delivery of the Jordanian tanks by completing them at Thunderbolt Armor Works directly. "We can bring in the components and finish the first 5 units here," he proposed. "It won't solve the whole production gap, but it demonstrates our commitment to the delivery schedule." Harrington approved the plan, and the Arizona workshop transformed into a temporary final assembly facility. The original prototype bay, where the Warhorse had first taken shape, now accommodated the first production tanks destined for international delivery. Colonel Nassar visited to inspect the progress, impressed by the consortium's resilience in the face of adversity. This rapid adaptation speaks well of your organization, he observed. In military operations and business alike, the ability to overcome unexpected challenges determines success. Through extraordinary effort, the first 5 Jordanian tanks were completed only 2 weeks behind schedule. The delivery ceremony in Amman received international media coverage, with Jordan's king personally inspecting the modernized vehicles. The images of M60 tanks with their distinctive, upgraded profiles operating alongside more modern systems generated significant interest from other potential customers. Meanwhile, the fire investigation had reached its conclusion. Surveillance footage, initially corrupted but recovered through specialized forensics, revealed an unauthorized individual accessing the paint booth shortly before the fire started. Facial recognition identified a former Cortec employee with specialized knowledge of industrial sabotage techniques. Federal authorities issued an arrest warrant, but the suspect had already fled the country. More damaging for Cortec was evidence found on the suspect's abandoned laptop, suggesting corporate knowledge of the planned sabotage. The FBI launched a formal investigation into Cortec's executives, including Richard Blackwood. Senator Williams called with updates on the investigation's political ramifications. Blackwood's been placed on administrative leave by his board. The Pentagon has suspended all new contracts with Cortec pending the outcome of the investigation. What about their portion of the Sierra inventory? Harrington asked, thinking of the A3 variants allocated to Cortec. That's actually why I'm calling. The contracts being reviewed. There's a strong possibility those tanks will be reallocated. Williams paused. Your consortium would be the logical recipient if that happens. The implication was clear. They might end up with the entire Sierra inventory after all. It would require rapid scaling of their already strained production capacity. But the opportunity was too significant to decline. We'd need to modify the upgrade packages for the A3 variants, Harrington noted, already thinking through the technical implications. Their baseline systems are different enough to require distinct modernization paths. Develop the proposal, Williams advised. The decision could come as early as next month. As production resumed at the restored Oklahoma facility, Harrington focused on the A3 variant modernization concept. These tanks, with their more advanced original configurations, would require less comprehensive upgrades but more sophisticated integration work. Jason contributed significantly to this planning, developing an enhanced electronic architecture that leveraged the A3's existing systems while adding modern capabilities. We can actually achieve higher performance with these variants at lower cost, he explained during a technical review. The baseline fire control system is more compatible with digital upgrades. The potential expansion coincided with Martinez's return to full duty. His health had improved significantly, though he now delegated more physical tasks to younger team members. His experience proved invaluable in developing the A3 modernization package, having worked extensively with that variant during his military service. 6 months into the program, with production now meeting targeted volumes and the first combat units deployed with customer nations, Harrington received unexpected news from the Pentagon. General Wilson requested an urgent video conference, his expression serious when the connection established. Thunder, I'm calling about the autonomous tank program, he began without preamble. Cortec's prototype was deployed to a forward operating base for evaluation. There was an incident. Harrington's concern was immediate. Casualties? Wilson nodded grimly. The autonomous system misidentified friendly forces during a night exercise, engaged a light armored vehicle before operators could override. 2 soldiers wounded, 1 critically. The news was disturbing, but not entirely surprising. Harrington and others had consistently warned about the risks of removing human judgment from targeting decisions, particularly in complex battlefield environments where friend or foe identification relied on contextual understanding. The program's been suspended indefinitely, Wilson continued, and there's more. The investigation into the fire at your facility uncovered deeper issues at Cortec. Evidence suggests Blackwood authorized multiple actions against your consortium, potentially including the earlier sabotage attempts. Justice would take its course through the legal system, but the immediate impact on their program was significant. The Pentagon was reevaluating its entire approach to armored vehicle modernization, with growing support for manned platforms with autonomous augmentation rather than fully autonomous systems. This shift aligned perfectly with the consortium's philosophy. Their modernized M60s incorporated advanced technology to enhance crew effectiveness without replacing human judgment in critical decisions. Jason's drone integration system exemplified this approach, providing expanded situational awareness while keeping humans in the command loop. The following week brought confirmation that Cortex contract for the A3 variants had been terminated. The consortium would receive formal notification to submit a proposal for assuming responsibility for these additional tanks. With this development, the modernization program's scope expanded beyond anyone's initial projections. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save Thunderbolt Armor Works from bankruptcy had evolved into a transformative initiative for American armored vehicle doctrine and allied military capabilities. As the program's first anniversary approached, Harrington contemplated this journey from his office, overlooking the expanded workshop facilities. The original building was now surrounded by new construction, additional production bays, engineering laboratories, and training facilities for international crews. Miguel entered with the latest production reports. "We've reached 200 completed units," he announced proudly, right on the revised schedule despite everything that's happened. Harrington nodded appreciatively. The program had overcome sabotage, fire, health crises, and political opposition. Each challenge had been met with determination and ingenuity by a team united in their belief in the mission. "We should mark the milestone properly," he decided. "Gather everyone for a brief ceremony. They've earned the recognition." Later that afternoon, the entire Arizona team assembled in the main workshop bay, where the original Warhorse prototype stood alongside the latest production model, the evolution of their design visible in the refinements and enhancements that separated the two vehicles. Harrington addressed them without prepared remarks, speaking from the heart. "1 year ago, most of us were facing uncertain futures. This workshop was weeks away from closure. The tanks at Sierra were destined for scrap, and the expertise of American armor crews was being discarded in favor of algorithms and remote operators." He gestured to the tanks behind him. "Today, these machines are defending freedom around the world. The skills that many of you developed over decades of service are being preserved and passed to allies who share our values. We've proven that human judgment, augmented by technology but never replaced by it, remains the foundation of effective armored warfare." The applause that followed reflected more than professional satisfaction. It carried the pride of craftsmen who had created something meaningful and enduring. Many of the veterans had found renewed purpose in the program, their specialized knowledge valued rather than obsolete. As the gathering dispersed, Harrington remained beside the prototype, joined by Jason and Martinez. 3 generations of American armor expertise united in a project that bridged past and future. "We should start thinking about what's next," Jason suggested. "The M60 program has momentum, but there are other legacy platforms that could benefit from similar approaches." Martinez nodded in agreement. "The M113 fleet is massive worldwide, similar modernization potential, different technical challenges." Harrington considered these possibilities. The consortium had developed not just upgraded tanks, but a methodology for extending the service life of proven platforms, a sustainable approach to military procurement that balanced capability with fiscal responsibility. "One step at a time," he advised. "Let's complete this mission before starting the next campaign." But even as he counseled patience, Harrington knew the future held expanded horizons for their work. The modernization philosophy had proven its value, technically and economically. What had begun as a last stand, a desperate attempt to preserve a legacy, had evolved into a forward-looking enterprise with global impact. That evening, as sunset painted the Arizona desert in gold and crimson, Harrington walked alone among the tanks awaiting shipment to their new operators. Each represented American engineering excellence, updated for contemporary challenges, but retaining the robust reliability that had made these machines legendary. More importantly, each would carry a crew of human warriors, men making split-second decisions based on training, experience, and the ineffable human quality of judgment. Technology would enhance their capabilities, but the essential human element of warfare remained central to the design. In a rapidly changing world where automation and artificial intelligence were transforming every industry, Harrington and his team had demonstrated that some roles still required the human touch. Steel forged by human hands, guided by human minds, serving human values. This was the legacy they had preserved and extended into a new era. His phone vibrated with a message from Jason. Just got word. Senate committee approved the expanded program. Full funding for 5 years, plus foreign military sales support. We're officially mainstream doctrine now. Harrington smiled, slipping the phone back into his pocket without responding immediately. The news deserved proper celebration, but for now, he wanted to savor this quiet moment of accomplishment. The modernized tanks would soon deploy to training grounds and potential battlefields around the world, carrying with them not just American technology, but American values. Innovation balanced with pragmatism, progress rooted in proven principles, and above all, respect for the human element in even the most technological endeavors. This, Harrington reflected, was a legacy worthy of preservation. Not tanks as museum pieces, but as evolving platforms that adapted to changing threats while maintaining their essential character. Just as he and his generation of warriors had adapted to new challenges without abandoning the core principles that defined them. The desert light faded, stars emerging in the darkening sky. Another day completed, another milestone achieved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but the path forward was clear now. A path that honored the past while embracing the future, that valued human skill and judgment even as technology advanced. Steel legacy indeed, not just of machines, but of the men who built them, operated them, and now had given them new life for a new century of service. Chapter 8, The Next Horizon. The expanded modernization program transformed Thunderbolt Armor Works beyond recognition. What had begun as a struggling repair shop became the nerve center of a global enterprise, coordinating production across multiple facilities and supporting deployed tanks on 3 continents. Harrington found himself increasingly focused on strategic direction rather than day-to-day operations. Miguel now managed the Arizona facility, while Martinez oversaw technical integration across all production sites. Karen Reynolds had expanded her fire control business significantly, with dedicated production lines for the M60 program alongside her other defense contracts. Jason had perhaps changed the most dramatically. From a drone operator contemplating a corporate career, he had emerged as the consortium's chief innovation officer, leading the integration of unmanned systems with traditional armored platforms. His hybrid approach, manned vehicles with autonomous support elements, had become the consortium's technological signature. 1 year after the program's inception, Harrington stood with Senator Williams at the Oklahoma facility, watching the 500th modernized tank roll off the production line. The milestone vehicle featured special markings commemorating the achievement, destined for display at the Armor School at Fort Benning before deployment to a frontline unit. "You've accomplished something remarkable here," Williams acknowledged, genuine respect in his voice. "Not just revitalizing old tanks, but revitalizing American armor doctrine." "It was a team effort," Harrington replied, "and there's still much to do." Indeed, the program had evolved beyond its initial scope. In addition to the original M60 modernization, they had begun development work on other legacy platforms: M113 armored personnel carriers, M109 self-propelled howitzers, and even early model Bradley fighting vehicles. Each presented unique technical challenges, but the underlying philosophy remained consistent: extend service life through targeted upgrades rather than complete replacement. The approach had gained traction internationally as well. Israel, long a pioneer in armor modernization, had formed a joint venture with the consortium to share technology and market access. Turkish defense firms had proposed similar arrangements, recognizing the global market potential for affordable modernization solutions. Cortex's downfall had created additional opportunities, with Richard Blackwood facing federal charges and the company's reputation severely damaged. Its defense contracts were being redistributed among competitors. The autonomous tank program had been completely reconceptualized, with human operators remaining central to operations, while autonomous systems provided support functions. Harrington had testified before congressional committees about the lessons learned, emphasizing the importance of human judgment in combat operations. His perspective carried particular weight given the program's demonstrated success and his own combat experience. "The tank isn't just a weapons platform," he had explained to the Armed Services Committee. "It's a system built around human decision-making. Remove that element, and you've created something fundamentally different and potentially more dangerous." This philosophy had resonated with military leaders concerned about the ethical implications of autonomous weapons. The consortium's approach, enhancing human capabilities rather than replacing them, offered a middle path between technological stagnation and unchecked automation. The program's success had personal dimensions as well. Thunderbolt Armor Works was now secure for generations, with Jason positioned to eventually assume leadership. The father-son relationship had healed through their shared work, each gaining appreciation for the other's perspective. Martinez had fully recovered from his heart attack, though he now focused on design and mentoring rather than hands-on implementation. His legacy continued through the dozens of young engineers and technicians he had trained, many of them veterans themselves. On a crisp fall morning, as Harrington reviewed plans for the next phase of the program, he received an unexpected visitor. A Marine Corps general, recently appointed as the next commandant, arrived without formal announcement. "Colonel Harrington," the general greeted him with a firm handshake. "Hope you don't mind the surprise visit. Wanted to see this operation firsthand before making some decisions." Harrington provided a comprehensive tour, explaining the modernization philosophy and demonstrating the enhanced capabilities of the upgraded vehicles. The general asked pointed questions about performance metrics, maintenance requirements, and crew interfaces. As they concluded in Harrington's office, the general's purpose became clear. "The Corps is reevaluating our armored vehicle strategy," he explained. "The current procurement path, all new vehicles with maximized technology, is proving fiscally unsustainable. Your modernization model offers an alternative worth considering." The Marine Corps had always approached equipment differently than the Army, emphasizing reliability and simplicity over cutting-edge technology. The consortium's modernization approach aligned well with this philosophy. "We have approximately 200 older armored vehicles that could benefit from targeted upgrades," the general continued. "Not a full fleet replacement, but a bridge strategy while next-generation systems mature." It was a significant potential expansion, and one that would further validate their approach at the highest levels of military planning. More importantly, it represented an opportunity to enhance Marine Corps capabilities within existing budget constraints, serving national security through practical innovation. As Harrington considered this opportunity, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate attempt to save a family business to a program reshaping military procurement philosophy, a transformation as significant as the one they had applied to the aging tanks themselves. The modernized M60s would continue serving for decades, their fundamental design proven through generations of combat while their capabilities evolved to meet contemporary threats. Like the veterans who had given them new life, these machines demonstrated that experience and adaptation could be more valuable than novelty alone. Steel legacy indeed, not just preserved, but renewed and extended into a future where human skill and judgment remain the essential elements of effective warfare, even as technology advanced to support them. In that balance between tradition and innovation, between human and machine, lay the true achievement of their work. Not just modernized tanks, but a modernized philosophy that recognized the enduring value of human experience in an increasingly automated world. As the Marine Commandant departed with promises of further discussions, Harrington turned his attention back to the technical specifications on his desk. Another generation of armored vehicles awaiting transformation. Another opportunity to extend a legacy of American engineering excellence in military effectiveness. The work continued, as it always would. Steel forged by human hands, guided by human minds, serving human values. A legacy not merely remembered, but lived and extended into a new century of service. Chapter 9, Full Circle. 5 years after the first modernized M60 rolled off the production line, Harrington stood at the entrance to the expanded Thunderbolt Armor Works campus. What had once been a struggling repair shop now encompassed multiple buildings, test ranges, and training facilities spread across 50 acres of Arizona desert. The original workshop remained at the heart of the complex, preserved as both functional space and symbolic center. It was here that the Warhorse prototype had taken shape, where a desperate gamble had transformed into a global enterprise. Harrington was preparing to step back from day-to-day operations, transitioning to an advisory role while Jason assumed greater leadership responsibilities. At 63, he wasn't retiring completely. His experience remained valuable. But the time had come to entrust the future to the next generation. The occasion for this transition was the delivery of the 1,000th modernized vehicle, a milestone coinciding with his decision to reduce his operational involvement. The ceremony would include representatives from every nation operating the upgraded tanks, along with American military and political leaders who had supported the program. As preparations for the event proceeded, Harrington took a moment alone with the original Warhorse prototype, now preserved as a display piece in the campus museum. The tank had been restored to its demonstration configuration, bearing the scars and modifications that told the story of their journey. "Quite a machine," came a familiar voice from behind him. Richard Blackwood stood in the museum entrance, older and somehow diminished from their last encounter. The federal investigation had ended with a plea agreement. He had avoided prison but lost his position at Cortec and much of his personal fortune. "Richard," Harrington acknowledged, surprised but not alarmed, "didn't expect to see you here." Blackwood approached slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Received an invitation to the ceremony. Thought it might be a mistake, but decided to come anyway." He gestured toward the Warhorse. "You succeeded where I failed. Wanted to see it for myself." The admission was unexpected. Harrington studied his old adversary carefully, looking for signs of the arrogance that had characterized their previous interactions. Instead, he saw what appeared to be genuine reflection. The autonomous concept wasn't fundamentally flawed, Harrington offered, surprising himself with the concession. It was the complete removal of the human element that created the problems. Blackwood nodded slowly. "I see that now. Machines executing judgment functions that require human contextual understanding. An error in first principles." He turned to face Harrington directly. "For what it's worth, I never authorized the sabotage. Encouraged aggressive competition? Yes, but not criminal action. Whether this was truth or self-serving revision was impossible to determine. Harrington chose not to pursue it. The legal proceedings were concluded. The program had succeeded despite the opposition, and old enmities served no purpose now. "The ceremony starts at 11, he said instead. "General Wilson is the keynote speaker. You're welcome to attend." Blackwood hesitated. "Not sure that's wise. Many there would question my presence." "Your company developed valid innovations," Harrington pointed out. "The current integrated systems incorporate elements from both approaches. That's worth acknowledging." It was true, the modernized tanks now featured limited autonomous capabilities, threat detection, countermeasures deployment, and secondary weapons control, while reserving principal judgment functions for the human crew. Even Cortex research, redirected after the autonomous program's cancellation, had contributed to these developments. Blackwood seemed to consider this perspective. "Perhaps I will attend," briefly and unobtrusively. He departed as quietly as he had arrived, leaving Harrington to reflect on the strange circularity of their rivalry. What had begun as bitter competition had evolved into distinct approaches that ultimately cross-pollinated for the greater effectiveness of American armored forces. The ceremony itself reflected this integration of perspectives. Veterans of traditional armored warfare stood alongside technology specialists and autonomous systems engineers, all contributing to a modernization philosophy that valued both human experience and technological advancement. Senator Williams, now chairman of the Armed Services Committee, delivered remarks emphasizing this balanced approach. "We have avoided the false choice between human experience and technological innovation," he concluded. "Instead, we have harnessed both, preserving the essential human judgment that defines ethical warfare while embracing the capabilities that technology provides." As the 1000th tank was officially presented, a specially modified command variant destined for the armor school, Harrington found himself standing between Jason and Martinez, 3 generations of American armor expertise, representing a continuity of purpose despite the changing technological landscape. "Full circle," Martinez murmured, nodding toward the tank. "From museum pieces to frontline assets, from retirement to renewed purpose." The observation applied equally to the tanks and to the men who had given them new life. Veterans whose expertise might have been discarded, instead contributing to a program that would influence military doctrine for decades to come. In his brief remarks, Harrington emphasized this human dimension. "Tanks are not merely machines," he reminded the audience. "They are extensions of human will and judgment. Their effectiveness depends not on autonomy, but on the skill and courage of their crews." This philosophy had become the consortium's signature, a recognition that even as technology advanced, the human element remained central to effective armored warfare. The modernized tanks embodied this approach, enhancing crew capabilities without attempting to replace human judgment in critical decisions. As the formal ceremony concluded and guests moved to the reception, Harrington noticed Blackwood standing at the periphery, observing rather than participating. He made his way through the crowd to his former rival. Your perspective contributed to this outcome, he acknowledged. The integration of autonomous support systems with human command has proven more effective than either approach alone. Blackwood accepted the olive branch with a slight nod. The future is integration, not replacement. I see that now. He extended his hand. Congratulations on building something that will endure, James. The use of his given name, rather than rank or call sign, marked a shift from military rivalry to personal acknowledgement. Harrington accepted the handshake, recognizing that reconciliation served their shared commitment to American military effectiveness. Later, as the celebration continued into the evening, Harrington found a quiet moment with Jason and Martinez on the workshop's observation deck. Below them, the illuminated campus stretched into the desert darkness, a testament to what they had built together. I never imagined this outcome when we started, Harrington admitted. Just wanted to save the workshop and preserve some tanks from the scrapyard. Martinez chuckled. Ended up reshaping armored warfare doctrine instead. Not bad for a desperate gamble. Jason gestured toward the training facility where international crews were learning to operate the modernized tanks. It's not just the machines or the doctrine. It's the community you have preserved. The tank crews, the mechanics, the engineers. A living tradition that would have been lost. This was perhaps the most significant achievement, not just modernized tanks, but a modernized philosophy that recognized the enduring value of human experience in an increasingly automated world. As leadership transitioned to Jason and the next generation of engineers, this philosophy would continue guiding their work. Technology would advance, capabilities would expand, but the essential human element would remain at the core of their approach. Steel legacy, not merely remembered but lived and extended into a new century of service. Not tanks as museum pieces, but as evolving platforms that adapted to changing threats while maintaining their essential character. And not veterans as relics of past conflicts, but as valued contributors to future security. In that balance between tradition and innovation, between human and machine, lay the true achievement of their work. A legacy preserved not through stasis, but through thoughtful evolution, honoring the past while embracing the future. As darkness settled over the desert, the three men remained on the observation deck, their conversation turning to the next horizons, new platforms to modernize, new capabilities to integrate, new challenges to address. The work would continue, as it always had. Steel forged by human hands, guided by human minds, serving human values. A legacy not ended but renewed, through machines and men alike. Full circle indeed, not an ending but a continuation, not retirement but renewal, not obsolescence but evolution. The tanks would roll on, as would the tradition they embodied. Different in form and capability, but unchanged in essential purpose. The defense of freedom through the combination of American engineering excellence and the courage of those who served. Steel legacy, enduring, evolving, eternal.